We have Hurricane Ian Recovery Community Update. We have number 2 is Hurricane Ian Financial Update. 3, prioritizing workshop topics. And 4, agenda review of the November 1st, 2022 regular agenda meeting. I know Ms. Gittens had just called to notify us she is on her way. She was having some problems with her vehicle. And we will go ahead and begin this meeting. I will turn this over to Dr. Bernier. Thank you.
Madam Chair, thank you very much, members of the board. We got 2 sort of updates today. We will do a better job of consolidating these into one presentation regarding Ian, but we thought the financial presentation in and of itself deserved its own opportunity versus just a general update, which will come weekly for me. So I think there's some specific financial concerns as we move forward, and we want to be as transparent as possible, and potentially putting these 2 things together could have been better. So I'm here to provide an update related to the reopening of schools and Hurricane Ian. I want to thank again the team for all the work that they've done last week, the 17th through the 21st. We managed to get, by the 21st, all of our students in an educational environment. I've offered in the best situations, it's always in the best interest of children. These are not ideal situations. Certainly 3 schools sharing a school building and Hector Caffaretta split between 2 sites are temporary locations, and we will work diligently in order to come up with better accommodations temporarily until such time as this board makes the decision based upon recommendations from staff as to how we're going to proceed with particular buildings. We've done incredible work in terms of looking at staff and student data. We've revised the instructional calendar, which I'll give you an update on today. The community engagement piece is well underway, and we had great meetings this morning with both Sanibel and the Fort Myers Beach community, and then we have Caffaretta scheduled for tomorrow. So in terms of reopening our schools, we're looking at all schools, again, return to academic instruction. Diplomat and Lexington Middle School, which we've said from the very beginning, we're due to open on October 31st. We got an update yesterday from Jeff Wagner and from the internal and the contractors. Those projects still appear to be on schedule. It looks like there will be people in the building on the 31st, and best case scenario, those people will include students. But we are in the process of making sure that we do the same thing for Lexington that we've done for other schools. They already had a reunification day. So it looks like Monday potentially would be teachers only to get their rooms and get settled in the building again, and then there would be the opportunity for students to start on November 1st. That's our outside timeline. There's a possibility that we could be doing those days for those school buildings the week before on Friday, and they would open for students on Monday. So again, transitional and developmental process, it really has to do with contractors turning over the buildings, making sure that our checklist has been completed, but those 2 buildings are proceeding on schedule. Teacher and staff engagement with personal items, it has been a concern of the board as well as us. We are working now with our contractors in the remaining sites to secure materials of the teachers in their classrooms. So they're being boxed individually based upon room. They are being provided an opportunity. There's an update for Hector Caffaretta in terms of them getting their materials sooner rather than later. It appears as early as next week we may be able to get the materials from Sanibel delivered to San Carlos. And the last school building we'll have to tackle will be Fort Myers Beach Elementary. And during the community engagement meeting this morning, we spoke both with the community and Dr. Kohler, and they're aware that there has to be more remediation done at their building before we can begin to box those personal items. All schools are set up with the ability, if a teacher opens their box and something's not there, there's a form that we've asked the principals to provide where they could say, I'm Chris Bernier, I was in room 202 of Hector Caffaretta. I don't have my picture of my granddaughter and my wife from my desk. Cotton has agreed that they will go back in and look for those items, but there is great possibility that those items may have been significantly damaged and no longer exist. But we wanted to make sure that as they open the box, if they have additional requests, that we're being responsive to it. And we can't thank, this is certainly not part of Cotton's remediation contract, but it is part of this level of service they're delivering to this community. We are beginning a procurement process for portable sites. As you will remember, just prior to my relinquishing the emergency rights and rules that I had, we were discussing the potential of a contract with a company to put in portable sites very quickly. We got some information prior to me signing off on that it would be more prudent to follow a more clear and concise process for procurement of that individual or those individuals to build those temporary campuses. Meaning, if I went forward and signed, we could certainly have had portable sites stood up more quickly, but we would have had the situation where potentially those sites would not be reimbursable either by our insurance or by FEMA. So that afternoon, I relinquished the rights back to you as a board, and we're entering into a procurement process and potentially looking at bringing information to you as early as next week regarding an ITN and making sure that we have all our I's crossed and T's, all our I's dotted and T's crossed in order to make sure that we are good with both our FEMA consultant, Imperium, as well as our insurance company and eventually with FEMA. We have been asked by the state to provide a preliminary estimate of damage by November 1st. The only estimate you'll hear today is in Amy's presentation, Dr. Desamore's presentation. It's not the number that we've been sharing previously because, and I'm trying to be politically correct, insurance adjusters work for the insurance company, and we're not sure that all of the information is accurately reflected in those initial totals that have come in from the insurance company. We will share those numbers during Dr. Desamore's presentation, but I think she will caution you that those numbers will potentially rise from there. And we still have not had, like, our construction division, somebody like Scott Rickenbacker and even a Jeff Wagner look at what costs are. And it certainly does not include any rebuilding of a school building yet. And if you think about what Montessori is now rising towards, which is about $55 to $59 million, that figure would not be in there if we were to need to rebuild Cafferetta. We did get good news related to Sanibel School yesterday. Sanibel School is currently under remediation. They are being cleaned out and dried out. The structural engineers have stated that the building itself is sound. So instead of Sanibel being a rebuild, it will be a renovation. We will not need to tear Sanibel School down in order to rebuild it. We will simply have to remediate it. And all of you have seen Lexington Middle, similar to Lexington, just a little bit higher up on the walls based upon the amount of water that hasn't been in some of the buildings. Again, the major impact to Sanibel would be in their older buildings. The new construction that was provided a number of years ago raised the level of the middle school classrooms, and that is less damaged due to water than the original buildings, which were built at a lower level. My apologies. So we also have been hard at work. We had an opportunity to revise the instructional calendar. I want to tell the public first and foremost, you will not have to go to school any longer. It is the same calendar. We built a number of hours into our instructional minutes. So our revised calendar, which has been reviewed by the state, does provide the number of hours for students that meet the statutory requirements. We had more minutes in our calendar than were required by the state. So we already had additional minutes to work with. So there will be 3 full days of makeup. Those will be spread out over the course of the year on November 11th, 2022, February 17th, 2023, and May 5, 2023. And again, that does not extend the school year in any way, shape, or form. It also leaves intact the holidays that I think some of our families are counting on if they're in a financial condition to be able to get away from Fort Myers and Lee County to get some rest and relaxation. Their Thanksgiving, their Christmases, their spring breaks, their winter holidays will be of the same dates as were originally on the calendar. There will be 2 additional changes to the calendar, and I think our parents will like these. 2 previous early release days for our teachers to be involved in professional development. Those will be extended to full days for students and staff. That is February 22nd, 2023, and April 26th, 2023. So our instructional calendar is good to go. I apologize that an information got out to you prior to it coming to the board, I have reiterated the need for a particular cadence in our communication. Before large announcements go out, it's very important for the board to know first. And I'm not sure in all these cases that you were the first ones to know. And for that, I apologize, but I can tell you that the steps have been taken to ensure that that does not continue to occur. For student and staff data, we have an opportunity to look at these particular numbers. I won't belittle any or pick on any one of them. They are just simply the data that we have from 10/17 when we opened through 10/25. You'll see student attendance in the first column from 82% reaching a high on 10/18 of 90.9 and then coming back down to 86.9%. Our TALC attendance, those are our teachers, rising from 92.57 to a high of 94.75, and now still at the 93.41%. Again, while those people are in attendance, we want to be respectful to their personal situations. We're all hearing amazing stories of our teachers, not only their personal conditions, but their heroism and how they help deal with their families as floodwaters and storm surge rose. We continue to support and be available to our teachers and staff, and we are currently working with the foundation. I have a meeting with Marshall tomorrow regarding the check that was provided to the foundation by the First Lady through the governor last Friday. So more details to come on how the foundation plans to set up the way for people to access that money. Our SPALC attendance also began at 90.93 and has risen, I'm happy to say, that on 10/25 it rose to its highest level of 93.54%. So despite people's personal situations, they're coming to work, and with 86% of our students and 90% of our staff or more, what we are using our educational facilities to do is continue to do the very important work of triaging what our people need. Getting our students back into the school building and getting their teachers and staff with them has been amazingly helpful in understanding and recognizing the need of those individuals and making sure we can steer them to the resources they need. Community engagement, love those two words used together. We have been meeting with Fort Myers Beach and Sanibel School today. We have Hector Caffaretta tomorrow. They are advisory groups. They believe they are information conduits back to their community, and we have set both with Fort Myers Beach and Sanibel a weekly cadence, so we will meet with them weekly. We have explained that some weeks we will have more to share than others. We still do not have a date for reopening or the reconstruction of any one of those sites. Sanibel does know, now that I've said it to all of you, that their building passed the engineering test. The building is physically sound, so we have work to do in order to fix the inside of it. Fort Myers Beach met with them today. We were very explicit that all options are on the table and that for the very foreseeable future, they need to consider San Carlos Elementary their home. They were interested in that because they're trying to make some decisions about, it's a new phrase, permanent temporary housing. They're trying to decide where they want to live while their homes are being reconstructed or while they make a decision, and they wanted to know where they might be able to locate. One parent in particular also wanted to know if the option was still open for them potentially to transfer to a school closer to where they live. They've moved out east of 75, and we are accommodating those wishes as they express them. So we will continue to keep you updated on both of those sites, and I will get you an update via email regarding Hector Caffaretta's meeting. Quickly, and I don't want to steal too much from Amy's presentation, the last thing I had was vendor open house. We had that scheduled, I believe, for either the day of the hurricane or the day after. We are coming back to that vendor open house. It will be held on November 4th at the Caloosahatchee Room. We will assist in local businesses in helping them increase their partnership and business opportunities, to learn about local goods and services that the district procures, to learn how to register and bid on district contracts. We will give them help and assistance so that they know how and when our bidding process will roll out and have the skills necessary to appropriately bid as local industry, and learn how to monitor the bidding opportunities, and then most importantly, how to submit a bid that complies with the district bidding requirements, therefore making them eligible for a lot of the work that we're going to need to do moving forward. As I've said before, the initial impact of the hurricane we've kind of passed that triage phase. We've stabilized our buildings. Again, they're not perfect, and not all of the educational environments are perfect, but our school buildings are coming along. Our teachers and staff and personnel, our support professionals, are engaging with our kids, and we are moving forward. There's still a ton of work left to do, but every day we get up and we tackle the new issue and the new problem. We set a new deadline for us regarding when we want to get it accomplished by, and then we work like heck to try to make sure we meet those deadlines. So that's the update currently, other than to share with you that following this meeting, the damage reports and the IAQs, it took us a little bit of time to find a place where that could live, because that will grow more extensively as those documents become available. But we have found a location on the website, and those documents regarding the IAQs and the buildings will begin to be uploaded immediately following this meeting, so parents will be able to get a look. All the IAQs will go up, and we're going to start with our medium to high impacted buildings, because we believe that's the information that our community really wants to know. Not that we just picked up some debris on the front lawn. They want to know more about their roof or their walls or their windows, and where we are and how we're proceeding with those buildings. At that point, I would turn it over to the board for any questions or discussion, and my chief of staff is also available to us as well.
Thank you. Ms. Vaughn, and then Ms. Patrica.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Bernier, for that. Two things. Number one, thank you to everybody who participated in figuring out ways that the teachers from highly impacted schools can get at least some of their belongings that survived. I think most of us board members went on a tour of some of those highly impacted schools, and it certainly was a wake-up call, especially walking into Hector Cafarata to see just the catastrophic damage, unfortunately, to that school. And the other thing I wanted to mention is, I know there has been, speaking of vendors and contractors and all of that, a lot of concern, let's say, in the community about local people working here. And as we did the tour, and I hadn't really thought about this before, but I don't know what percentage, but it seemed to me that a majority of the labor that Cotton had doing the hard work in these schools were local individuals. I'm not talking about companies, but they were local individuals. Am I correct, Dr. Bernier?
Ms. Vaughn, I don't have a number or percentage, so I can get that information. We can certainly contact Cotton, but it was a mix of both local and people from outside the state.
Right, but there were, I don't need a number, but just anecdotally, talking to a few of the people and some of the Cotton, the supervisors, managers there, they brought in, let's say, a significant number of local workers, which I'm sure in a lot of ways, it helps. We have so many people that were displaced from their jobs that I'm sure it was helpful to the local economy that, it wasn't that they imported a huge number from nearby cities. A lot of the workers were local people, so I found that to be a good thing too. So there's a lot of work ahead. And the other thing that just popped into my mind, and all of you know I've said it enough over the past 4 years about being a former teacher, but I said to somebody at one point, it's almost like touring Pompeii or something. I mean, it was like you walk in and there's all this damage, and yet there's a whiteboard, and the next day's assignment was on the board. And it was like, again, a moment of in time among all that destruction. There's what the teacher had intended to do the next day or some instructions. So it was, to somebody like me that was used to, for years, having all that stuff on the board when I left the classroom, it was really, it was moving to see that moment in time. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I just respond
Yes,
to one thing?
please.
And that's just an announcement to the community that Ms. Vaughn reminded me when she talked about the people who've been displaced from their jobs. There are a plethora of opportunities within the school district of Lee County. We are open for business. Our Human Resource Division is ready to welcome you. Should you choose to be a professional educator or want to do something else in terms of service back to this community and help to serve our children, the school district is ready to move you through those processes as quickly as possible. We need you.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Vaughn. Ms. Patrica, please.
Thank you. I have one comment, and then if I may, through the chair, ask some questions. Thank you for the update on Diplomat in Lexington on the 31st. I'm hearing from teachers that they're concerned about whether they're going to have time in the building alone so that they can see what was ruined, what wasn't ruined, you know, what do they have to replace, get their classroom set up again, mostly those first floor teachers in Lexington. I wonder about the communication. I hear the cadence, and I appreciate that. But I'm also hearing from teachers that they're learning about this on social media as the rest of the public is. And if we could find a way to prioritize communicating with those specific school communities before we put it out in public, right? Just a suggestion, just providing you with the feedback that I have received.
I really appreciate that. So let's take a second to talk about what the cadence is and should be. When we make district-wide decisions, or we're going to put out something to all employees or eventually to all parents, we begin first by informing the board. The next level to receive the level of communication is the cabinet. Immediately following that are building supervisors and supervisors. So that would be principals. So the principals are communicated not with just via email, but the academic services team, especially when it's impacting a singular school or several schools, reaches out directly to those principals and has that conversation. If I'm hearing you correctly, the feedback you may be receiving is the teachers feel like they're not getting enough communication. We are not communicating individually with each teacher. We are really very reliant upon our principals, and I believe generally they have done that as information has been available. You know, the meeting with Sanibel was very interesting today. They were very helpful for the information we were able to provide about the school, but the question was, you know, why today? Why did it have to wait for today? And we were just very explicit. We didn't get the engineering report and the final thing from the engineer until yesterday afternoon. It's just a little bit of serendipity as to when it happened and when we can share the information. So I would encourage people to still come forward if they feel like they're not getting the right level of communication, because what we don't know, we can't fix.
Right.
So if they'll tell us, we can work to get better.
And that's exactly what I say to them, is thank you for bringing it to my attention. You know, everybody's been understanding that this is an unprecedented event, and they're just providing suggestions. You don't have to provide answers to these questions right now, but if you could make a note of it, maybe give it in the board update, I'd appreciate it. Will FEMA cover portable campuses and whatever it is we decide to do with those buildings? So let's use Cafarata as an example. We are going to need portable campuses there, I would assume, because the work that needs to be done in the permanent building is either extensive or a complete rebuild. Will FEMA cover both of those? And then, in terms of attendance, do we have historical numbers on these specific dates, going back, let's say, 5 years-ish? And the reason why I ask is because the past couple years with the pandemic, I don't know that they're really typical, but if we could go back 5 years, right now I have numbers without context. If I could have some context, that would be helpful. And then also a per-school breakdown of those attendance numbers for students and staff, along with just a brief update, give us an overview of what it is staff is doing in the school communities with low attendance for students, in order to try to reach out and figure out whether those students are returning, whether they're not. And then my final question is, and this might seem a little hard-hearted, but it is a question I have to ask, at what point will we be requiring students and staff to return to their learning environments and their working environments? And again, I don't need those answers today. If you could just provide an update. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may, I do have some of those answers. Let's talk about the FEMA coverage and portable campuses. There is some discussion ongoing between myself and procurement, myself and our legal department and our finance department. There is the potential that FEMA could cover. There is also the potential that it would not. I do believe that before we bring a recommendation to move into the portable campuses world, we would have a more definitive decision for you so that our recommendation to you would be more informed. But I would also coach all of us that the situation at Hector Caffaretta with 2 schools being split in half with the primary and secondary grades, I know that the possibility of a portable campus and the millions of dollars is not something that we'd want to necessarily that cost is not something we'd necessarily want to incur, but I think if you're going to give Caffaretta what it needs in order to heal and come back as a learning community, because they are still going to be facing standardized exams, they're still facing dropping children into kindergarten at one location and a 5th grade at another. I do believe that may be an expense that I would recommend to you that we take. Because it does the best thing for that community and then allows us to rebuild their school building. We are still making the decision about Caffaretta about whether, and we're still receiving those estimates of whether a gut and a rebuild is better than or less expensive than a complete knockdown and then starting over. So we are still in that process, and that's what we're going to talk to the Caffaretta community about tomorrow. So there is the possibility. Dr. Desamore was really very direct with me and wanted to make sure that all of you knew there could be the potential of us spending millions of dollars to build a portable campus and then also rebuilding Hector Caffaretta. And there is the possibility that the portable campus might not be reimbursed. And once we have a definitive answer, we would bring that to the recommendation of, into your request, or the request of you to approve us to build a portable campus. And that will be your decision point, and I'll brief you more as I get more information.
And can I just add to that, when you're briefing us, could we look at growth numbers in the Cape when we're considering a rebuild as well? Because that would be helpful. If we have space at 2 elementary schools to split Caffaretta, it tells me that we have space out there, but I know that we're anticipating significant growth on the Cape, so I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that will be part of my decision-making process. Thank you.
Understood. I think that's a great point, and yes, that should come as well. But there's also a very clear message: if you don't rebuild a building, there's also a message to a community about
Understood.
them as well. So I think that these are
and I'm
all
not sending that message.
these are all
I'm not
transitional
sending
and
that
developmental
message.
times. We just don't have all the answers yet. So I appreciate that. Attendance, we certainly can go back and give you some context. Again, I don't think the COVID years are the best place to go, so I understand why you're asking to go further back than that. We were providing a chart school breakdown by school. We can go back and make sure that that is provided to you on a daily basis. I know Jeff is tracking those numbers, and he'll send them directly to me, and I will pass them on to you. I will add to your thought process when you work with upcoming workshops. I think it would be important for us to talk about attendance and what we're doing with students to help them and teachers to help them be more engaged with us. But I think also what you're asking me was, when are we going to make the decision that people need to start to come? We are putting information out, and I believe it already has gone out to staff, that beginning after October 31st, if they need to take leave, the proper leave procedures will be in place beginning November 1st. If they don't have leave, we have ways to work with people based upon our collective bargaining agreements, but that would not impact any type of check until the last check cycle in November. So they would still see one more full paycheck on October 31st and on the 15th of November. The first check that could potentially be impacted would be their November 30th or November 30th check. I believe around the same time as we get closer to Thanksgiving, we will begin to say to parents, if you're in the area and your children are there, we need to help and assist you in getting your children back into school. I am currently working with my staff regarding the new North Fort Myers shelter. We are finding young people there. Unlike the Red Cross, we do now have names of those students. So we will begin to meet up there. I'm going tomorrow to visit. I'm bringing, by the end of the week, we hope to have our the people who work with homelessness in our school system there, student enrollment to be there, and helping those parents access what they need. We're not even sure if these students were ours originally. It doesn't matter. They're students in our community that need the opportunity to go to school, and we have begun that process beginning yesterday afternoon.
Thank you both for that. Ms. Gittens, please.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. You know, as you listen to the situation and what we've gone through, I think of afterthoughts, and I'm always thinking of process documents and where we go in the future, and instead of if I coulda, woulda, shoulda, more like this is how we did it this time, what can we do differently to make it better the next time? And I think communication is one of the points, because communication and transparency are quite muddled in many people's minds. They feel if they haven't heard it, you're not being transparent. And I say this to say, perhaps looking at, if, God forbid, we ever have another situation like this, what should be first? What do people need to know? And a way to look at that is, where was the biggest hue and cry? The biggest hue and cry was, when are you going to get schools open? And I think to counteract that, if the community had actually seen the devastation, seen inside some of the schools, and some of the really bad things that had gone on, they would have been able to have a little more patience maybe, and saying, okay, yeah, this is really, really bad. But if they don't see what is actually happening, then that kind of it's not the same. On the calendar piece is one as well. Everybody wants to know when we're getting back, and when everybody has to be back at school, and that type of thing. So I'm just saying that if we, after the fact, sit back and look at what could we have done differently, I won't say better, I'm saying differently, that may have waylaid some of the angst that was in the community. And honestly, I think that if the board or key people, you know, that are going to be making decisions, were allowed to see the situation sooner, there would have been more acceptance, because yes, we could have said to constituents that talk to us about, well, what's going on and why can't we do this? And we would have been able to say, truly from our own minds and hearts, it was bad. It was really bad. And when I went, I did take pictures and I did post them on social media, because one of the things I did when I passed by classrooms that still had someone's name, I took a picture, and I took a picture in the room, and I posted it, and I did it on purpose because I knew those teachers were not going to be able to get back in there soon. And I think to kind of relieve them a little bit, to see her lesson plan was still on the board. The Promethean board was still up. That, you know, the carpet was missing in my room. And I've had teachers say, you know, thanks for doing that. At least I saw. The anticipation of something that's tragic like this makes people crazy. So even allowing some type of showing them, and if the administrators were going in, then have them take pictures or whatever. But if you share with people soon enough, they don't have time to make up how bad it is in their own minds. Regarding the vendor piece, and I had spoken with the superintendent about this, and on the tour, I think Lexington, one of the cotton supervisors was walking along with us, and we were asking questions about that. another thing that if it was put out a little bit sooner, Cotton had trucks parked ready to go. If we said we had an event tomorrow and we need you here, they were telling us they have semis packed with supplies, they know what they need to get started, and they had that all ready to go. So they are at that level of right now instantly. What they did talk about was that the next level, once they do that, all that they do to kind of get us at least back on 2 feet, is when we bring in the local companies, which is why we're having the vendor fair, because the next segment of it is going to be the local vendors doing most of that work. And again, if you say that in the beginning, you avoid people saying, well, you're not hiring local vendors. If you show the plan, this is what we're going to do. First of all, these people have everything ready to go. You have to order supplies and hope you get them. They already have it ready to go. So just, I don't want to say transparency, I guess I want to say communication. It's how you simplistically put it out there so everyone understands step by step what's going on, and then the word gets out expediently and correctly. So, and thank you for your reports.
Anyone else, any other comments? Ms. Giovanelli?
So on my list was to talk about the shelter, so I just want to thank you, because I didn't know if you were aware. And I had several constituents actually call me this morning, and I've been on the phone nonstop, and I said, I will talk to the superintendent, make them aware, because we weren't even sure that you were. Because I was told that they're not letting anyone in, like, no one. So hopefully that won't be an issue and that you can get those students to school. Thank you very much.
Yes, we are working with them. I would remind everybody that the nice part of having Dave Newland is having Dave Newland. The second nice part of having Dave Newland is he's still embedded at the EOC. He is still working there full-time. So everything with the shelter is coming out of that EOC communications. He was the one able to secure us the list. My goal is to make headway tomorrow, personally, so that staff has even better headway when they arrive.
Great, thank you so much.
And I just want to say, I did have an opportunity to go in there. I went there, and I asked to go in there, and just going into that plaza was just, I felt like I was in a sci-fi movie, the way that it was set up, and all the police and everything that were around there. And speaking to the people that were outside and going inside and seeing that, so I really am appreciative that we are moving forward, and which they already had that on their site to do that, but we're definitely going to go in there. So I'm happy about that. Ms. Gittens, you had your hand up again?
If I missed this, let me know, but do we know the number of students in the one existing shelter now?
I do not have the list of names in front of me. I'm told it's between 45 and 50. Some of the students are already going to school, however. They already have their uniforms, they have everything they need. Their parents are just waiting on temporary housing. We are interested in those young people, but we're even more interested in some of the young people that we may not have ever met and are new to our community and now find themselves in this situation. We are seeing new enrollments at our school buildings.
And are they the ones that are in the shelter, though? Are we providing transportation for them to get to school?
We will work with our families based upon their need, yes, ma'am. But we don't know much about these families yet, so more information would have to come. Transportation is certainly one of those necessities to get young people to school buildings.
Right, because I guess I was looking at it like if they went to Hector Cafaretta or whatever and they're in the shelter now, where would they just go temporarily to some other school that's closest?
We would work with a family on an individual basis the way we worked with all families that have really relocated within this community during this storm. There are people that went to school in the Cape that are living out in Lehigh. There are people, who used to live in Fort Myers Beach that are living in North Fort Myers. We're working with each individual student.
And do we have the numbers? I know we opened up the temporary choice offices. Do we have any data from those offices as to how the movement of students?
We have understanding regarding what the schools are reporting as percentage of attendance based upon their enrollment. We are pulling numbers of those students who have officially withdrawn from our school system. We are pulling the numbers of the students who have officially entered our system. I believe if you think of just withdrawals compared to enrollments, I may defer to Michael, but I think we're like a negative 100 and change. So while we've had 300 and some leave and fully withdraw, we've had 200 new students register, for instance, but we will get you that in a board update this Friday.
Okay, and I would like to have it, if I could, by the particular offices. In other words, did we have a lot more in people applying in one area than in another? And you can put that in the data. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to, just to remind everybody, the people that are in the shelter in North Fort Myers, they were somewhere else in the beginning. Then they went from there to Hertz Arena, and then from the Hertz Arena to North. So these people who are in the shelter at this moment can be from anywhere. So we have to remember that when we're talking about that, and that's why they have to go in and assess that, what the situation is before they can give us any kind of response. I'm going to go to Ms. Morgan and then Ms. Giovanelli. And Ms. Fisher, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Your comment reminded me that I did want to say something about the fact that you're meeting with Marshall tomorrow. We do have enormous needs in our staff, and when I go to the Collier website, the foundation acknowledges that the funds have been made available, but without a scope, and so they're in the process of establishing a process. When you go to the foundation, there's no acknowledgement of that, of the donation, and there's simply a request for additional funds. I think it's really important, given the magnitude of the amount of money that we've been promised, that there be more clear communication with the public, either by us or the foundation, about how that process is going to roll out, because there are staff people that have tremendous need, and it's difficult to know that there's funds out there, but there's no understanding of how it's going to move forward. So, thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may, it's an excellent point. I want everyone to know that Friday was quite a surprise to all of us. We knew we were having a press conference. We had heard some information that there might be a check presentation, but we were very unclear as we stood before the governor made his announcement about the First Lady's fundraising efforts as to what we would receive. I remember as Marshall leaned back with the big check in his hand, I said to him, now the real work begins. And that was one of the reasons I called him on Friday. That's one of the reasons I followed up with him on Monday, and yesterday was able to get the appointment with him on Thursday. This money was given to the foundation. I am lucky, along with another member of the board, to sit on that executive board and the larger board for that group. So we will begin those conversations in earnest, because there's a need, and now there's money, and we need to make the connection between the need and the dollars. And I know that Marshall and the other members of the foundation governing board will help us accomplish that task. I did go out last night and look at some of the other foundations as well, and I was, I guess, pleasantly surprised that we're not too far behind. But I do think we need to begin to move, and I would like us to see us continue to be the leader here in terms of connecting our staff to the dollars that the governor's first lady has made available to us.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Ms. Fisher, because she hasn't spoken yet, and then I'll come back to you, Ms. Giovanelli. Ms. Fisher?
Okay, thank you. So I just want to thank our district staff and our people at the schools for all of the work that you have done. A lot has been accomplished. Regarding communication and connectivity, I do want to remind us that there are still some people who are not connected and not getting a lot of the communication. So, and they may not have social media. So we have to keep that in mind, and hopefully at the schools, and I've visited several of the schools and talked with many staff people, and what I have found out is that they have come together in their own little school community and helped each other. I was at a school yesterday, and they said they had 6 staff members who lost their homes. And now the rest of the staff every weekend is going to those locations and helping with the cleanup and the rebuilding and supporting those people. Interestingly, some people who are employees of ours have been helped by FEMA, but are in places like Orlando and the East Coast, and they're not anywhere here, but they hopefully will be able to get back. But there was one story in particular about a paraprofessional with 3 young children, no insurance, was a renter, and her place was destroyed, and so she's in Orlando with her kids, and the staff at the school is trying with all kinds of efforts to get her back here and have her have a place to stay. So there are still a lot of those stories, and they may not be coming to the surface. But people, human nature being what it is, you know, sometimes tragedy brings out the best in people. So people are working very hard to support one another, and I just want to make sure that we do appreciate that. And when it comes to patience, we're going to need a lot of patience, because this is going to take months, if not years, to get us back to a situation where communication is flowing and everybody's okay. So those are my comments right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Ms. Giovanelli?
One of the questions that I've been meaning to ask, like for the 3 schools like Sanibel, Lexington, and Fort Myers Beach, that has, where is the cafeteria staff, the secretaries and the bookkeepers and the janitors, where are they at? Are they, you know, like the building supervisors, what is happening with those employees?
Those individuals are still employed with the school district, and they are moved to their temporary locations with their students and with their faculties. Triple the number of students at San Carlos Elementary means triple the amount of work in the cafeteria. So the cafeteria staff, the custodial staff are all pitching in there to make sure that they are prepared. In fact, I got the nice opportunity a couple days ago, I guess it was last Friday, to meet the building supervisor of Fort Myers Beach Elementary. When Dr. Kohler and I walked into the school, there were already a set of footprints in the carpet and the mud. And come to find out it were her footprints. Dr. Kohler had shared that with me, and I finally had the opportunity to meet her, and I met her at San Carlos. She was busy doing a number of things that the other building supervisor at San Carlos was so thankful to have an extra set of hands. So those individuals are still employed with the school district, and they're helping out in the sites where the schools have been transferred to.
Okay, Ms. Gates, I'm going to have you, one final question, because I know we're already over on this one. So go
This
ahead,
was
please.
just in relationship to what Ms. Fisher was saying about the staff member that's out of the county. I would suggest we make sure we put it out there that any staff members that are having housing difficulties contact either Jared or Adam, and to get on that list. Because I know when the list first started, there were some issues of people being told they were going to be outside. But with all the connections and the communications, it was definitely stated that these people on this list needed to be within Lee County. So we need to make sure that it's clear to everyone that is having that issue to check with the district and get on that list.
Perfect, thank you for that reminder. Okay, Dr. B, we'll go ahead and thank you very much, Mr. Ramirez, for being there. We will move on to our next part of this, which is the hurricane, the financial update. Dr. B, so I'm going to turn that back to you.
So as staff transitions, I'd like to welcome Dr. Desamores and Ms. Millay. They have been an integral part of this process. I don't think Bonnie was able to join us today. Bonnie has also been contributing to this presentation regarding our insurance situation, what's covered, what isn't covered, what deductibles and other things are. This again is a early look at where we are. It is a very early look of where we are. It is a transitional and developmental process, so you will see some facts and figures in here, and I'm really sort of speaking more to the public. These numbers are truly subject to change. You know, the minute you start a renovation in your own home, right, especially a home that you've never owned before, and you open a wall thinking that's where the new kitchen door is going to go, you may find that you need now a header board, additional 2x4s, and a chance in order to make sure that that ceiling doesn't collapse. We're not talking about necessarily with the schools, but I am saying as we get in and begin to look at the repairs, we may find that we have to go deeper and further. So I want to just caution people, these are early numbers. I think Dr. Desamores will use estimate probably 1 million times so we can play bingo at home. These are all cost estimates and estimates of damage, but I look forward to your attention to this presentation. Dr. Desamores and her staff has worked extremely hard to get this ready for today, and with great timing, because the state today sent us the memo asking for our cost estimates, early cost estimates, not anything final, by November 1st, from all the districts impacted by the hurricane, not just the school district of Lee County. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Desamore.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Bernier. Members of the board, can y'all hear me okay? All right, very good. So wanted to start out the presentation with a comparison here or a review for Hurricane Irma, because we've heard a few comparisons. So just in comparison, the district documented losses during Hurricane Irma were $31 million. And our loss recoveries to date are as listed here, for a total of about $21.6 million to date. Now recall that Irma was in 2017, and the reason why I wanted to make sure to provide this reminder information is, number one, because of, as you see, the length of time that it potentially takes for recovery of any funds that the district will spend throughout this event. It's been 5 years since Irma, and we are still working with trying to recover dollars from FEMA. And then number two, just talking about the very real possibility that some funds won't be recovered. Depending on what the ruling is from FEMA, that there is a real possibility that some funds that we spent at this time and will spend coming up with this event will not be recovered. So just a piece of information. So with Hurricane Ian then, in comparison, our total documented losses to date, now of course we are just very new in this process and just starting. So when I say documented losses, really what that means is at this point the amount of purchase orders that we've let or that we've issued for the work currently being done. And as of October 23rd, which I believe was Sunday, we were at a little over $11.8 million in purchase orders that have been created for remediation and for short-term recovery. It's just at that time, and of course, as you know, there is much more to go because we have at least 5 schools with significant damage and at least 19 of them that are being evaluated for a scope of work for permanent repair and cost estimates related to that. So we are very early in our process, but that is where we are right now. In terms of estimated losses, total estimated losses for the district, as Dr. Bernier just mentioned, we have an estimated, put your marker on your card, estimated dollar of losses from our insurance carrier that we just received yesterday. And that preliminary number, very, very early, very preliminary, is around $150 million. Now, this could change. This probably will change. This is a very early preliminary estimate from our insurance company. And we still have lots more work going on with our consultant Imperium, our FEMA consultant that's here working with us, as well as all of the information that we're gathering from all of the people that are out working at our schools right now, getting ready to give us those cost estimates that will continue to inform, solidify, and change this number. So this is just very preliminary information we have. So, of course, even looking at that number, based on what we know now, we anticipate that losses from Ian would be multiple of what we saw with Irma. Even with this preliminary estimate we have now is 5 times. And we're certainly not done with those estimates in that number yet. So that being said, let's talk about our financial position, what that means, these anticipated costs, what the district will do, and how we will potentially financially cover the losses that we know we have. So first of all, where do the funds come from to rebuild? They're from several main places. First of all, we know that we have our reimbursements, right? So insurance would be one of those, which we have property and flood insurance that will help cover. We've got the FEMA reimbursements, and then also potential reimbursement from the county for shelter costs. So yes, all of these reimbursements are possible and within our future, but not in the near future. And we may not cover, and those reimbursements may not cover the entire cost. With that time frame, which is a very important aspect because we have budget, but then we have cash flow as well. So cash, has to be in the bank, so to speak, in order to cover costs. And the reimbursements, we know not to expect them anytime in the near future. So if you scroll back to this one, sorry. And then capital funds are used to fund most of the expenditures that will be incurred to restore and repair the district. So as we're talking about that $11.8 million that we've led in purchase orders so far, as we talk about all of the things that are upcoming in the future, most of those expenditures will be covered out of the capital funds that we have. Just a little bit about our district insurance coverages, and there are many, so they're all listed here. Most of the ones that we are dealing with as far as this event would be property and flood. So those are the major policies that we'll be dealing with in this event. And this talks a little bit about some of the limits that we have within our policies. So with the windstorm policy, we have a $75 million limit, and the flood policy, which is specific to location, specific to building, to each school, there is a total $50 million limit, and the hurricane deductible is 5% of the value of the structure. So that is our insurance structure that we're dealing with through this event. So that's going to be part of our reimbursement. And then as we go, flood insurance. So this is through the National Flood Insurance Program. As we talked about, a $50 million limit. They are, specific policies are purchased for specific buildings. And so as we go through the event, of course, we have to work with insurance so that they determine what kind of event is this? Is this damage that's caused by wind, or is it caused by the flood? Which policy will cover what thing? And so we work to maximize all of our reimbursements through insurance and trying to maximize the usage of all of our policies and what types of damage that they'll cover, and then moving on into our other reimbursements, namely for FEMA. So getting down into the numbers, when we talk about our finances now, cash on hand, our capital plan fund, or our capital fund balance, so right now I'm talking specifically capital funds. So the capital plan fund balance coming into this current fiscal year, FY23, was $393.8 million. That was our total fund balance. But out of that, I'm going to take out the funds that are out there for specific purposes. In other words, our impact fees, which are only supposed to be used to add seats for new students to the district, our sales tax dollars, which are for specific purposes, and our COPS, or certificates of participation, which are borrowed for specific buildings, right? So if I back that out of the total, that's about $145.4 million. And then I'm also backing out the amount of funds approximately that were budgeted this year for items that were supposed to be done and completed this year. This is about $150 million. So when you back out all of those things from the total, right now, we are working with about $98.4 million that we're using for the recovery. So, so this is a couple things. First of all, the funds being used for the recovery may mean that the 5-year capital plan must be revised. So those funds, of course, are sitting there now as a reserve. So some of it is reserved, but of course, much of it is intended to be used sometime within the 5 or 10 years. When we're talking capital plan, it's not necessarily, you know, a short term. It could be usage of the funds in the long term, 5 or 10 years. So depending on how reimbursement goes, it may mean that some of the things that we had planned for in the 5-year capital plan may need to be revised depending on how much we will need to use to recover. This is $98.4 million, and you heard me mention at least $150 million in the slides before when we talked about estimated losses. So this will not cover it all, right? So if more funds than that $98.4 million are needed or need to be used before any funds are recovered, then we may have to, at that point, look at the utilization of sales tax funds, or short-term borrowing options may be necessary as well. So within our recovery, you all know that there were 4 main categories that we use sales tax funding for. We could utilize sales tax funding to help us with our recovery, but we want to try to use that as a last resort, so to speak. We want to make sure that we're utilizing other things and then trying to make sure we get some reimbursements in before we dip into that. But should it become necessary to go into that funding source, we will, of course, be having conversation with the superintendent, who will be having conversation with the board, and then also with ISOC committee and the community in order to be have very good communication, as Ms. Fisher mentioned earlier, about exactly how much is coming out of there, how we're using it, all of that. But it could certainly be necessary given the numbers that you see here versus even now what our preliminary losses could be. So if we go next. So let's talk about a little bit about the potential short-term and the long-term financial impacts. So first, dealing with property taxes in the short term. Now, property taxes, I know many times when we talk property taxes, people's minds first jump to capital plan, right? Because that's where a lot of our funds for the capital plan come in through property tax. But remember, property taxes are a major source of revenue for both capital and general funds. In the FEFP, or the Florida Education Finance Program, where we get most of our money in the general fund, 61% of those funds come from property tax, the required local effort and the local discretionary that we go through and you all vote on at the beginning of the budget year. So most of the funds inside of both the general and capital come from property tax, major source of revenue for both. So based on this event, the impacts to the collections are unknown, but we are planning for negative impacts. We anticipated or budgeted based on everything that we received from the property appraiser, from the state at the very beginning of our budget cycle, for a certain value of property tax and a certain amount of collections based on that value. What we have learned from the property appraiser is that at this time, the property values won't change, but there is a possibility of people being able to take advantage of a process called abatement, which means that if you have a home that now that was livable and you got a property tax bill for, and now because of the event that home is no longer livable, you may be able to abate your taxes, property taxes, or in other words, not pay them for this year, which is going to potentially, of course, affect our collections, which would, of course, affect the amount of actual money that we see coming into both the general and the capital fund. So something for all of us to consider and for us to plan for as we continue on through this recovery process. And then major property tax collections are usually expected in November, right? As you all may be familiar with, or the public, if you own a piece of property, that you typically sometime in October get your actual property tax bill, and then you get several dates for the payment. If you pay it by November, it's a certain discounted amount, and then they have a couple of other dates listed after that, with April being the final date to pay, and then you have to pay a little bit more in April if you wait till the later payment date. But the property tax values were just certified a couple of days ago on a late basis. They were certified later than as typical because of the storm. And we don't know at this point whether those due dates will remain the same and whether we can expect the same collections in November or not, or when we will expect them. And these are substantial amounts of money, because in November or December is when we get the major cash infusion from our property taxes. About 86% of those taxes are collected between November and December in both the general and the capital fund, translating to hundreds of millions in each fund. If we don't receive that in November, which is just in next week, as a matter of fact, a couple of weeks, we would have expected to receive that. If we don't receive that, then we have to plan for that, because what that means is a major impact to cash flow. If we don't receive the hundreds of millions of dollars that we expected to receive at that time, then we have to make sure that we are making plans to cover that cash flow in the event that we receive those collections late. And then when we receive the collections late, of course, we have to plan for if we don't receive not only late, but the amount of collections that we're receiving. So several things that we're doing to plan for that, including researching our short-term borrowing possibilities in the market with our banks. Of course, if we end up having to implement something like that, you all will know at the time, and it'll be a board approval process for those. And then in the long term, so our future property valuations affect future collections that we have previously planned for. So in the 5 and 10-year capital plan, we expected a certain, or budgeted for certain collections in that 5 and 10-year plan based on our estimates of property valuation, which could look very different moving forward than what it was before. So another reason, again, why we would have to revise the capital plan and reevaluate what things can be done and what things may not be able to be done based on all of these different factors. The amount that we had to spend on the recovery, the amount that we may not be collecting in property taxes, all of that. And then, of course, FTE is another consideration as well, meaning the number of students that we have in the district. Our FEFP is based on that, mostly on that number. And so if we don't have the number of students that we had anticipated to have, we were anticipating almost a 2,000 student increase this year, and then we had anticipated really that would continue within the coming years, because our county has been in a student growth mode for quite some time. If that does not come to pass, then that is, again, another financial impact for the general fund that we will need to plan and adjust for. So those are the potential short and long-term financial impacts that we wanted to make sure to discuss with you. We have precious, not little information right now in terms of how all these things are going to turn out, but we needed to make sure that you all knew that these were possibilities, and that we knew that they were possibilities, and we are doing our best to plan to mitigate those impacts and make sure that financially the district is in a place to be able to adjust to whatever our new circumstances may be. So speaking of the short and the long term, I also wanted to talk about potential short and long term, and you can flip. Potential short and longer term work. We know, and I think it was Ms. Gittens earlier that talked about the split of the work that was happening between short-term stuff that was going on and longer-term stuff that had to happen. And so here we talk about that a little bit in terms of all the things short-term that are going on right now, that immediate remediation and stabilization so we could get our schools open, the short-term repairs that needed to happen to get them ready for opening, any shelter cleanup that had to be done, and short-term fixes for schools like Diplomat Middle and Lexington Middle that were damaged a little bit more. So therefore, that is why students are not in those locations now, but will be very shortly here because of the short-term repairs that happened at those locations. And then, of course, we've got the longer-term plans that we had to make, the permanent repairs that will be in replacement of the short-term repairs that happen, our temporary campuses, starting with our Hector Cafferata community. As the superintendent mentioned earlier, those ongoing meetings with the Cafferata, Sanibel, and Beach communities, and then potential rebuilding of schools as well, as needed and as necessary. So that's kind of the look at the short and longer term work that we know needs to happen. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Millay, who will talk about how we have and will utilize our vendors in this process.
Thank you, Dr. Desamore. So a lot of the questions have been around how are we getting this work done, who's helping us, and how much of it is being performed locally versus, can you hear me okay? I can't tell if it's, all right. So the immediate work that we needed when the storm hit our area was the remediation and stabilization of our facilities, which you've seen a lot of information and observed the flood cuts on our hallways and in our classrooms. So for this work, we contacted our local on-bid remediation vendors. We had a call with them to talk about the amount of damages that we were seeing, the volume of work that was required, and their ability to perform complete services as the scope demanded. And it was a unanimous decision that the vendors could not do it on their own, and we all agreed that we would go out for additional support in the remediation and stabilization area. While we were preparing an RFQ in a very compressed timeline, we hired a vendor to assist us with cleaning the shelters and clearing out the kitchens where the freezers might not have had a generator, and taking care of them so they'd be able to return to operational use when students returned. To address the immediate need of increased remediation and stabilization work, we issued an emergency solicitation. We invited all of our local remediation and general contractors that are on bid with the district to respond to that, as well as some large national firms that, as was referenced earlier, they bring in the, tons and tons of supplies staged, ready to go on a massive scale. And we had all agreed that's what we were in need of, given the comprehensiveness of the devastation. So as a result of issuing an RFQ, turning it around, 24-hour turnaround for the vendors, everything was extremely rapid and compressed timeline. 14 responses were received, 6 from our local and on-bid vendors that were not able to provide the requested services in the volume that was needed. So we did choose to award to 4 national firms with that large mobilization capability, and we successfully concluded negotiations with 3 of them and have used them and are continuing to use them for our stabilization efforts. It's important, some of you have heard me say this is the temporary work, because that's how reimbursements go, is for temporary versus permanent work. So our temporary work, not only did we need the additional workers, we needed help managing them, so we issued a second RFQ for program management oversight of the 3 national firms, which would include boots on the ground at the sites observing that, as well as helping manage when the invoices come in and billing and accurate accounting for services billed. So we invited 3 firms and awarded to 1 national firm that had the best price and overall best qualifications to perform the work. So what has been done with all of those vendors? When we put this together over the weekend, the number of vendors locally that had supported us was in the 45 vendor range, and now it's up over 60 local vendors that the district has engaged with to recover for the temporary repairs. And we have engaged 5 new vendors who were not previously contracted with the district to perform the work. The large dollar amount, though, if you look at the numbers of companies supported, that's very heavily in favor of the locals, but the huge volume of the work at the worst cases, the schools in the worst condition, were performed by the national vendors, and so about half, it's split about half of the funds spent have been for the local vendors and about half for the national vendors. Let's see. So the largest projects and expenditures are still to come. So we need to, next steps and what we are currently doing and have already been receiving are scope for permanent repairs. They are coming in and will continue to come in over the next weeks and months likely. And so we will first turn to existing contracts, and we'll also be looking at awarding new contracts for the permanent work. So what's that permanent work look like? What we would like to do is, as much as possible, use our existing contracts with our existing vendors, and when we need to go out to bid, the opportunity to bid on the permanent repairs will be open competitive solicitation for all vendors to respond to. We are making sure that the project scopes are in compliance with FEMA reimbursement standards, and we'll be making sure that our vendors also comply with those standards so that the district has a more favorable review of our claims. We also are going to require in our permanent work the requirement for vendors to identify, if they're not a local vendor, what small local or minority firms they will be engaging with and what their plan will be to have the local community participate. Additional activities that we're doing to support our vendor community during this challenging time is we rapidly rescheduled the vendor open house that was scheduled for the week of the hurricane. And so we now have a date that tentative is now confirmed. So November 4th in the Caloosahatchee Room, next Friday, will be our vendor open house, where, as Dr. Bernier touched on earlier, vendors will be invited in to learn how to find bidding opportunities, how to submit compliant bid packages so that they are successful in their opportunities for bidding for district work. So it's a good educational opportunity, and we continue to reach out and advertise this, and we would encourage you to also share this information with the community as you're out and about. Additionally, something that's been going on for a little while now is the Small Business Enterprise Program. Last December, this board approved the Small Business Enterprise Policy, and during the year we've been planning the implementation of the program. Some achievements we've made since I've last provided an update are that we have engaged in a partnership with Florida Gulf Coast University, and they have agreed to conduct the registration and certification process for our Small Business Enterprise Program. Working with them and their Economic Research Institute, they've brought forward recommendations on, you've heard me say before, how do you define small when we're talking small businesses, right? What is small? So the criteria listed are together a set of criteria that would be evaluated for our vendors if they've been in business for 2 years, have 20 or fewer employees, and have a maximum annual revenue over 3 years of $2 million per year. Then you would be qualified to be a school district small business company, and then we would be issuing solicitations that would be bid on exclusively by members that are enrolled in our small business program. Dr. Bernier?
Dr. Bernier?
I don't have any comments. I think the presentation is deep and will create an inordinate amount of discussion here at the dais, so I will reserve my comments both for you as a board and for the two wonderful members of our team who presented to you. They have been fantastic and been burning the candle at both ends like the remaining team. They have, their work may not be as noticeable as a new roof or a new set of shingles or a bunch of garbage bags out in front of a school building that are finally collected, but without the effort of these people and who they represent, we would not be as far along as we are. So I want to just make sure they get the kudos from me before we open up to the board discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Bernier. I'm going to go with Mary Fisher, please. Ms. Fisher, and then Ms. Gittens, please.
Thank you. Thank you for an extraordinary, comprehensive presentation. It's a lot to handle. I just have one quick question. On slide 9, the district insurance on property, did I hear you say for windstorm and flood that limit is per building, or is it for the whole district?
No, the limits are for the whole district. What I meant to convey is that each building, for flood, each building has its own policy based on where it is in a flood zone, what flood zone it's in, that type of thing.
Okay.
But the limits, we're talking district-wide limits.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Thank you.
Is that your question? That's it. Okay, thank you. Ms. Gittens, please.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, ladies. And I hope you didn't lose much hair on this, because this was a lot. It was a whole lot to do, and I thank you. My question is comparing slide number 3 and slide number 5. On slide number 3, you say that our documented district loss was 31 million. Okay, and then on slide 5, and you did say that it just recently came in, is the district estimated loss from the insurance company. So question 1 is there an estimate from FEMA? Is there a third part of this, or is it just our estimated losses and the insurance estimated losses? How does that all fit together? Is it the 31 million plus the 150, or is the 31 subtracted from the 150?
Okay, so if I understand your question, let me first say the 31 on slide 3 is due to Hurricane Irma. So that's the last event.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
That's what I did, okay.
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay.
So the 100, and the estimated, at this point, 150 stands on its own as what the insurance company's preliminary estimate was related to our estimated losses from this event, Hurricane Ian.
Okay, so looking at 3, insurance, restart grant, local county, FEMA, and all of that is the totals.
No, all of that still is related to Irma, so.
Right, no, but I'm saying those entities are some of the ones that we will see a slide similar to this in the future for Ian with these items and how much they, am I correct in saying?
Yep,
Okay.
that's right.
And
that's
at
right.
this point, we only have the insurance piece.
Well, at this point, we have, so that insurance, so there's 2 different things. That insurance number you're looking at on this slide, slide 3, $8.4 million approximately, that's the amount that we actually recovered from the insurance company. That's the payout, in other words, so to speak, that the insurance company gave us on the total loss.
So why is there a difference? Would there be a difference in their 150? That we may not get that? This is just their estimate, and they may give us 100? Is that what we're saying?
Yes, that's what I'm saying, is that of all of the total documented losses, it may not be that insurance covers all of that documented loss. It may not be that FEMA covers all of that documented loss. There is, at this point, still a $10 million difference approximately between what the losses were for Irma and what we have received in reimbursements. So it could be very possible that of all the district's documented losses, whatever they end up being in the end, right? The insurance company estimated very preliminarily at this point 150 million, but that will change. Could very well be that even through all of the reimbursement avenues that we have, it will not total the total documented loss of the district. That is a very real possibility.
What, and I don't want to get too detailed, but if the insurance company themselves came in and gave you an estimate, how frequent is it that they will come back and make that estimate less? I mean, are they just going and saying, okay, we think we cover this and this and this, but we've got to go back and check, and they give you a number?
Yeah, it's not necessarily that that the estimate will be less, but just that the reimbursement for the loss may be less, depending on a few different things. What our deductible is for that policy, based on how insurance values a repair or cost versus what it actually is. So there are a few different reasons why that estimate would be more or less than, or more than what our reimbursement actually is.
Okay, and thank you for that. I appreciate it. And I hope it helps others to understand that it's difficult. I have one other thing. Vendors that did not meet the criteria at this point, and this may be Ms. Millay, that were denied for whatever reason, do they have an opportunity to come back? Are you going to open it up again if they were told no at one point and they fixed it or got the equipment or whatever it is they needed to do? Can they come back and when you put out other bids for the next part?
So the bids that have been released so far were for remediation and stabilization. That's going to likely be completed, I would hope, within 3 months of the event. So the vendors that have been awarded for that work will continue to work, and that includes our on-bid remediation and stabilization vendors. And so that opportunity for work is likely going to end in 3 to 4 months after the storm. The permanent work will either go out for bid again or be awarded, be issued work orders underneath of existing contracts. And so, like every solicitation we do, everyone is open to bid on any solicitation that we issue.
So on slide 19, where you talked about the small business enterprise and the qualifications, if I had these qualifications and I had a business and I came to you right after the storm and I wanted to participate and there were other reasons that I could not, but I still have these qualifications, so for the permanent work, I can still come back and apply for that.
Everyone will be eligible for participating in the permanent work, and if we have specific bids that can be focused for those smaller entities, we haven't even stood up yet. We haven't started the registration process yet. We had planned to roll that out in January, and my guess is there's going to be a little bit of a delay. But you know, we are launching our small business program. We are trying to recruit firms to participate in it, and then based on the participation that we get, we'll issue solicitations aligned with the firms that have registered as small businesses.
Right, so in other words, by January or whenever you finish this, you have to have these 3 things in order to be considered, is that?
No, everyone can
Everyone's
be
considered.
considered. So it would be a very small portion of work that would be set aside, is a term that's sometimes
Right.
used
Okay.
for small businesses.
Right.
But the vast majority, vast majority of
Oh,
our
for
work is
anything.
open for anyone to bid on.
But this would be for the set aside. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all your work.
Ms. Vaughn, please.
Okay, referring to slide 5, it's really obvious and almost a no-brainer that the numbers are going to be, the farther we get along, the more numbers that are going to be coming out. And if you were to do this presentation in a week or 2, we would have different numbers on here. Are you planning to put out the new numbers, for instance, purchase order totals now at 11.8 million, and estimated losses, and these little, they're not little, the facts that go along with this? Are you planning to put out the new numbers on a regular basis? And if so, how often?
We've not yet made final determinations of how often, but we have a hurricane update now scheduled for every work session and every board action meeting. So there will be regular cadence from this team regarding updates and changes in the numbers. I don't know that that would be a warranted presentation, for instance, Tuesday night, because I don't think there'll be much movement. However, if there was significant movement in a number, we would come back and provide you that information.
Oh, okay, and to follow on that, you know, this is a very detailed presentation and a lot of explanation and all. I'm going to assume we're not going to need going back and re-explaining and all of that, but I think it would be helpful, and I would like to see a definitive cadence. That seems to be the word of the day, definitive cadence on releasing the new numbers. And again, they're going to be slow in the beginning, but it's at some point, it might even be weekly, that there are huge changes in it. So I think that would be very helpful for us on the board and also for the community to see how these things are moving up. So I would be very much in support of that. And thank you for all of this detailed explanation, and it's going to be a long, how many years do you think on this one? What?
More than 5.
And let's just all pray that I've got to be political, the climate change that we have, that we won't have any more of these catastrophic events within that 5 years. But the way things are going, let's just pray. How much more damage can we incur as a community and, you know, still be able to, for the members of the community, even to, you know, keep up with cost of living. So I thank you for this, and we all need to say our prayers about another catastrophic occurrence, because we're still dealing with Irma, aren't we? Wow, it's just incredible. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. Ms. Morgan, please.
So following up on what Ms. Vaughn said, is there any way we can use the ISOC dashboard model to
Good idea.
talk about, you know, the ongoing costs of Irma and what's happening in the various schools? It looks like so far we've only recovered 2/3 of our Irma costs. Is the remaining amount FEMA, or is it pretty much distributed across all of the groups? That's number one. And two, do you see Imperium's role in this improving our odds of collection?
Great. So the first question was, I'm sorry, tell me the first question again.
It's the
We
ISOC
recovered
database.
2/3, so where is the 1/3 coming
The
from?
Irma claims recovered.
Yeah.
So we are at the tail end of our Irma claims recovery.
Okay.
All insurance proceeds have been paid out that will be paid. The Restart grant is exhausted. We maxed out on that. And we still have a couple of projects that are in the assessment phase in FEMA. And after all projects are awarded by FEMA, then it goes to the state for full audit. And so we have had about 3/4 of our projects audited, and we continue to have the audits for the remainder of the projects. And so I would estimate that at a minimum, we would receive another $500,000, and then the remainder of that would be the district's burden to bear.
Okay, thank you.
And you had a second question, which was
yeah.
Imperium's participation this time around. So we are fortunate to have a firm that we went through Irma with and helped us increase or maximize our claims as much as they could. And this time around, technology has changed significantly. And what our partner has brought to the table is data capture of the images of damages at schools. So part of our reason for FEMA not fully funding some of our claims was because they wanted more photographs, and this time we will have that completely covered.
Okay, I have a couple more questions and comments. Through the chair to the board attorney, I assume that the reason we can use sales tax is because essentially we would be using it for the same purpose, construction, maintenance, safety, and security. But in terms of our projected investments for the various schools in those categories under the sales tax referendum, to the extent that we change how we're going to use that money, what are there any obligations that we have to communicate whatever, sort of a shift in the trajectory of our need and spending?
So this was an issue that actually came up very recently. There was a recommendation that we try to match the schools to make sure that we're still on the list. And there was also a comment that was made that there is additional language that covers emergencies. So I haven't had a chance to eyeball that just yet, but that is where we are right now.
Okay, thank you. And then one last comment. The last few years, the state has funded increases in educational funding through local property taxes. And we are now in a situation where, and then the state is able to spend those funds somewhere else. I foresee a significant funding problem at the state level going forward for these counties. And I'm just wondering, in Irma, what our experience was dealing with the governor, the Department of Education, some of these other entities that are responsible for providing, state funding to offset, the loss in property value and loss going forward. So that's just a comment. If anybody wants to respond, that's okay.
I can start, and I'll look to the team. I think that is a difficult question for me to answer, not having been in the state during Hurricane Irma. But I did want to weigh in from the aspect of I believe one of the reasons for the November 1 deadline from the Chief Financial Officer for the Department of Education is they want to try to get a handle on this now as best they can. They'll be asking for additional updates often, so that speaks to Ms. Vaughn's idea of continuing a regular cadence of providing information to the board. We'll be providing regular information to the Department of Education. Of course, you will also get that same information at the same time. That being said, we all know how Tallahassee works. Now is the time where they're talking about financial implications, and before they get into the pie that can go towards these type of events, they want to start to get a handle from all the districts as to the total amount of costs. So I honestly believe that that's one of the reasons why we've got that letter today. And I honestly want to just say again that I can't speak for what happened during Irma, but I can speak directly to the help and support of the Department of Education and how they escalated our mission tickets from everything from passes for parents to get off Fort Myers Beach to get to school, to helping to clean up debris, specifically at bus stops. And they continue to work those issues for us and escalating those to the Florida State Emergency Management so we have a voice. And it's not just the school district of Lee County asking for something, it's them in concert with us asking for the same things.
Thank you. Okay, those are my questions and comments.
Thank you. Ms. Chiavelli, did you have something?
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for this, because it's so important to have to set the information, to give the information now and where we go from here, and the progression and so forth. So I think that's really important. One of the things that I was curious about is do we anticipate any delays regarding our projects, our present projects, with like Riverdale and Franklin Park and Cypress Lake, and we had so many set, already kind of scheduled or started that process, and will this, and I anticipate that it will, but I'm curious, regarding vendors and so forth, will this, affect the progress of those projected projects? Does that make sense? That was one of my concerns, what do we anticipate? Also, I'm understanding the insurance aspect and FEMA, because, I'm dealing with family and friends right now, and I put it in a little different perspective, maybe this will help some. You have some schools that were flood damaged, but some schools that were basically hurricane wind damage, and that's the same with homeowners. So one is having to go to one insurance company and one is having to go to the other, and now those two insurance companies are kind of battling out what who said, she said, whose fault is it? So that is what I think we're going to have to do, right? That's what my understanding. I think, so in the same sense, we're not sure how much is going to be paid by whom. It's almost like who's on first. But anyways, because that's what insurance companies like to do. So my concern is, or not concern, but like, okay, someone mentioned the Imperium. Are they kind of like the adjuster in the situation that's going to help us get additional funds or more, or just get paid on something that insurance companies love to say they're not going to pay because it wasn't there on their policy? Or are we, because I know we had to hire, and I'm talking a lot, so I apologize, but I know we had to hire several different companies to help us try to recoup some from Irma monies back and so forth. Are we anticipating that happening, or is Imperium going to help with that and facilitate that early on versus after the fact and after we get, denied? And I know people are experiencing that. They're already being denied by FEMA and their own insurance company, so, the next step is for them to hire an adjuster or hire an attorney. So are we anticipating that, hopefully, that Imperium is going to take care of that earlier on? I think that's my question.
You want to take that question first?
I asked a lot, I'm sorry.
There are a couple there. Hold the Imperium question to the very end. I think, first and foremost, I think Dr. Desamore was really clear that while we have a 5-year plan and we have projects underway, I think all projects are on the table, but that is also a legal question, because in some cases we have contracted agreements. So
Yes.
while what we build and how we build and how quickly we continue to do things, that is all part of figuring out how much we owe, and then how do we respond to that money, and then awaiting the reimbursement. But it is complicated also with contractual relationships that we may already have in place, and we have to look at those specifically when we think about some of the projects that are already underway. When it comes to the role of Imperium, I'll turn it over to the experts sitting over at the dais, because they are much better at it than I am. Those are the people I go to when I have those same questions.
So Imperium is a consultant that has been hired to work with us and the adjuster to help maximize our reimbursements from both insurance perspective and from the FEMA perspective. So insurance has different requirements and data collection needs than FEMA, and so they're well-versed in both of those areas, and they're making sure we have consistency of what's reported to both, and they are here for, initially, they were actually out in the field at all of our schools with the insurance adjuster, making the damage assessments and photographic captures. And then the long haul with Imperium will be to help establish the framework and the strategy for our FEMA claims, how we tackle it. There are so many choices to be made, and based on each unique situation, they will help guide us through the processes of the best way to strategize our FEMA claims and then to put together the packets of information required to receive reimbursement.
Thank you so much, because that's a level of comfort that I feel that was probably a piece that we missed with Irma. So I really, really appreciate that. And kudos to Dr. Bernier and to your staff for addressing that immediately. My other concern is supply chain delay. I know, and that can affect all projects, right? So, and I think we have to talk about that and keep talking about it, because we're going to get asked, you know, why isn't something done? And that's going to come up. So I just kind of want to throw that back out there. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up, and I know people are aware, but really, Ian versus Irma are very different. I mean, very, very different. So the significant damage and loss is greater than, and so the number here doesn't surprise me a bit, because like you said, we're still going to be doing projects and realize there was more damage done that we didn't even realize it after the fact. And it could be who knows when really. I mean, because the damage is very, the impact is unbelievable. I think that's really all I had, and thank you so much for answering that a lot. Thank you so much.
I'm going to hold you to it, that when I bring back supply chain issues, you're going to say you welcome them.
I know, that's why I'm bringing it up now, because if we talk about it, and we're going to have to, I just know, and that's why I brought
It's
it up.
coming.
Thank you.
I wrote it down too. Ms. Patrica?
Yeah, I have a bunch, so you can stop me when I've gone over my time, please. So back on slide 3, we show $118,000 in reimbursement from the county. I think that was shelter-related reimbursements. And I also understand that the statute requires the county to reimburse us for any shelter expenditures that are not covered by FEMA. I don't think we ever got fully reimbursed by the county for Irma, which really is frustrating to me. I'm wondering what we're doing now to ensure full reimbursement from the county for Ian. Are we in those conversations to make sure that we're getting what we're supposed to be getting instead of carrying the financial load of sheltering on top of the human resource load and the building load and everything that goes along with sheltering? Could we at least ask them to pick up the financial piece?
Dr. Desamores and I had a conversation just yesterday about the very same thing. We're in the process of, in a sense, collecting all of our receipts for sheltering, looking at all the personnel that we're working. But I did ask her yesterday to reach out to her point of contact at the county to open up the lines of communication now, even before we have a total, to ensure that they're still playing on the same team, making sure that none of the rules have changed as to how we're supposed to deliver that information, making sure that we are, in a sense, just working ahead. And as we pull that information together, I don't know whether Dr. Desamores in the last 24 hours had an opportunity to make that phone call or not. She doesn't report to me on a daily basis when it comes to that type of things. My guess is talking to her at 8 o'clock last night, she was a little busy just talking to her own superintendent. So she did nod her head no, she's not made that reach out yet, but we are in the process of engaging with those other stakeholders that are partners in this to make sure that we provide them what they need in order to maximize our reimbursements.
It's on my calendar to do for this afternoon, sir.
Thank you.
All right, and then moving on to slides 10 and 11, I think, obviously I'm just one of 7, but I think I'd appreciate a presentation on just insurance and what can we expect in terms of reimbursement from insurance. A per building deductible versus a per incident deductible, what's covered district-wide under various policies, how does that compare to other like-sized districts? Are the deductibles borne by us? Are they reimbursed by some other source? If they are borne by us, how do we pay those? What pot of money does that come out of? I think insurance is a huge piece in this, and just generally speaking on this presentation, I am very appreciative of your work. And I'm suspecting that you're kind of in the same situation that I'm in right now. I do not have my arms around this right now. And that's a really difficult feeling. I have felt that way since the day the hurricane hit. I don't have my arms around the money of this, and that's driving me a little bit crazy. And I know I have to be patient. I know it's going to take time. So I appreciate the work, but the insurance piece is really the piece that I have the least amount of understanding of at this point. So I don't know if that means a conversation with Bonnie or if it's something that you can provide to the board, I don't know how you want to handle that.
I think that is a presentation that, in my mind, in conversations with both Ms. Millay and Dr. Desamores yesterday, we added some of this information just as a generalist aspect to our insurance, but I did expect that question to arise, not only to get more specific related to our policies, what our policies cost, why just $75 million, how is that connected to what our costs are? Because, yeah, it would be great to carry, I don't know, we'll just make up a number, X number of dollars of insurance, but if that's cost prohibitive to being able to pay people, right, I think we need an opportunity to explore with all of you how we're insured, what it means, and then delve deeper into the future of what our insurance could or should look like.
Agreed, thank you. And then ISOC, Ms. Morgan, thank you for raising those issues. I do have concerns about the promises that we made to the public. We didn't promise that we would use the money to rebuild schools that were devastated by a hurricane. We promised to build new schools to meet growth. Right. And so I'd love to see some kind of legal analysis as to whether and how the sales tax dollars can be used in this, and I appreciate the fact that you're going to go to ISOC with any of it before any of it is spent, because I think they're an important partner in this. Where are we in terms of technology losses? I have to assume we've lost some Chromebooks. I have to assume that we lost some of those Promethean boards, is that what they're called? Whiteboards, whatever it is, the upgrades that we just made to our classrooms. In our damaged schools, I have to assume there's some technology loss there. Are those losses covered? What is the estimate on what that is? Who is our finance advisory liaison? I'd like to suggest that you perhaps bring this presentation to them when we come back together, or an update. We will be updated by then, but perhaps have them sort of beat it up and provide the board with some suggestions on how to maneuver our way through this process going forward. So we're not just looking at a decrease in cash flow, we're also looking at unexpected expenses. So you talked about accounting for losses in revenue. What does that mean, and what does that look like for us? I have to assume that means cutting expenses. Again, not answers I need today, just things if you could bring forward in the future as these decisions are made. What cuts are we looking at, and some difficult decisions are going to have to be made by the board with regard to that, and the sooner we can start to wrap our minds around that, I think the better. When do we expect to have our arms around the number of students that we lost? As I look at a high 80% attendance rate, I can assume a 10% loss in students. When will we have our arms around that number? And how long will the state fund us for our pre-Ian student counts?
First question last. The FTE window for us has now been defined as September 11th through September 26th. We have a date certain with the state of December 15th to submit all of our documentation related to how we were enrolled during that period of time. So that is September 11th to the day before the storm. That October FTE window, which is now in September, has opened. Our schools will be receiving instruction from Dr. Desamores and from Jennifer Cupid-McCoy. They will go about the FTE process. Their submission date tentatively for their submission of FTE to the district level, to the central level, is November 9th, with the 11th being a window of 2 days, the 10th and 11th, for Dr. Desamore's staff to review those transfers and that information to ensure it's accurate. If it's not, that provides us a whole nother week before Thanksgiving in order to make sure that our data is clean and appropriate and maximizes the amount of funding. Then it would be submitted in time, potentially before the Thanksgiving holidays begin, so that would be November 18th. Then that would give the state several weeks before date certain of December 15th to feed back to Dr. Desamore and her department if we need to make any changes. Again, we should be funded at about $100,000 about 100,000 students, but there are several things that go into FTE, including, it's not just counting the number of students who are there on any particular day. I mean, there's a lot more to it, especially when you get into weighted funding formulas and other things. But that's our avenue for ensuring FTE. And the explanation of using my brain capacity related to all those dates, there was a first part to that question. Ms. Patrica, I would just like to be reminded of it.
When do you anticipate having your arms around the number of students we've lost? And then the other part that I'm not sure I heard an answer to was, how long will the state provide us with that pre-Ian funding? Like, at what point do we have to go back to them with that post-hurricane number, and that's when we receive that funding?
Let's start with, when do we think we'll get our arms around when we'll know what happened to our students? I did say in the earlier presentation we would provide you an update from student enrollment. I believe it was Board Member Gittens that asked for some specific requirements, but all of you seemed to nod your heads that you wanted some specificity around the number of students who were drawn to this point, the number of students who are entering, where they're entering from, and how those are impacting our school environments. We'll get you that in a board update. I'm going to be candid. It could, for us to truly know the impact, could take up to a year, because it requires a family to land somewhere and then make the request back to us for their permanent records. So they may move to New York, but they'll have to, they'll have to register at Onteora High School, and then they'll have to contact Fort Myers for the record, and then we'll put in the appropriate withdrawal code. There will be a period of time, which we should continue to update you on a number of students, going slow because I know people are writing, and we should be able to update you on the number of students whose currently whereabouts is unknown to us. They were on our record before the 28th, they just haven't come back, nor has a request for records been made to us. That's how we'll close that loophole. I would like to tell you by December we'll have a good feeling on that, because families in the next several weeks will be making decisions of, are we going back, are we staying put? And I will tell you from my experience in Andrew in Orlando, those that evacuated from Homestead did not come home. They stayed in Orlando, they registered in our schools, but an interesting thing happens, the contractors, because they're going to be here so long, bring their families with them, and they realize that Southwest Florida is a great place to live. And then they start saying, wow, that new house that just went up, or that house that was just reconstructed, let's see what they're offering on that, and maybe we'll move here. So that's what Miami saw. As to the other issues regarding, student attendance and other things moving forward, I think the state will continue to be as supportive of us as we can. Dr. Desamore and I have talked about strategy and how we communicate with our Department of Education, and I'll say it out loud again. Our number of students returning will outpace, from the lessons learned from Michael and Bay County, the number of students returning will outpace the number of staff returning if we're not careful. So if we were to make a big adjustment in February, our number of students will continue to climb, but if we lose teachers, we're not going to get them back. And that's the discussion we have to have with the Department of Education, that if I were, due to financial constraints, put in a situation where I would look for a different job, I would find another teaching position in the surrounding counties. They're there. And as our student enrollment rises, I might not come back to fill. So we have to have ongoing conversations with the state regarding that.
Okay. Do you want me to stop?
One more question.
This is probably a little bit unrelated, but kind of related. Page 19, because it's in this presentation. The 2-year minimum time registered as a business piece concerns me a little bit. I'm a small business owner. In year 2, I did not have the ability to serve a large organization like the School District of Lee County. So are we going to have future discussions on these requirements going forward? Have we already approved these as a board? We've already approved them? Yeah. I don't know why that just hit me as I was looking at this, but it didn't hit me when we approved it. So, all right, I'll stop and come back. I'm almost done though.
Go ahead, Ms.
On to that?
Mr. Bruno or Ms. Millay. I know that she was get ready to say something.
So the information is being presented to you for the first time on slide 19. We have received this information working with Florida Gulf Coast University. We did start our community outreach to share this information, and that was done at the Construction Advisory Committee in September. We had scheduled dates for Equity and Diversity and Finance Advisory, and also we were planning to bring this to the board. It's not necessarily something the board would vote to approve. It's an update to the board. We're receiving community feedback, and these numbers are draft, and based on community feedback, we would look at keeping or revising them.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Pre-Bruno.
Just for clarity for my purposes and per board policy, I want to make sure, does the board want me to formulate a formal legal opinion with regards to the use of the sales tax for hurricane recovery expenses?
Thinking that we
Thank
would
you.
like to have that.
Thank you. Just want to make sure.
Thank you. And I know, Ms. Morgan, did you have a question regarding that particular? It went out of your head?
Yeah, what was just?
2 years. I
2
talked about
years.
2 years.
Oh. So
Construction company?
What we approved was the MOU with FGCU on the Small Business Enterprise Program, and that, I believe, was the extent of.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Gittens, please. Thank you for that reminder.
Okay, two things. The first thing, though, Ms. Patrica mentioned the Finance Advisory, and our staff liaison is Kelly Lecter, and I'm sure that she will be able to present to the group at our next meeting and be able to explain and bring whomever she likes to do. The other thing, and this is just a what if. I know we talked about some of the decisions may affect the 5 and 10-year plan. And probably not until you get the final figures, but a suggestion would be to see changing the 10-year plan first. In other words, starting with that, would that be, and I don't know financially, if you could start with the items that are budgeted for the 10-year plan and then work up to the 5. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because the 5-year plan is obviously current needs that have been deemed to be needs for various reasons. Can the subtraction start with the furthest out and come in, if that makes sense?
Yeah, yes, it does. I see what you're saying. Maybe yes and maybe no, depending on what the impact is. It may be that some adjustment that we make out in the year 6 to 10 could shore it up, but depending on what the impact is, it may be that what the revenue that we anticipate coming in the shorter window, the 5-year window, doesn't match up with the current expenses we have in the 5-year window, which in that case, we would have to make some adjustment in the year 1 to 5. So it just really does depend on the impact.
And I know that a lot of the 5-year plan, well, some of it, was supposed to be in the East Zone. I don't know what percentage of it was going to be in the West and the areas that were most hard hit. So that would be another question you don't have to answer right now, but in other words, if we had planned a school in the West Zone and now we're having to plan something else, it kind of, will it balance out? And I know there's not an answer to that, I'm just throwing that out there. That when we start looking at having to adjust, especially the 5 and 10-year plan, a lot of questions, a lot of things that need to be considered when doing that. And one of the things, of course, is the number of students. And we're talking about students not returning, but for example, in the East Zone, we're getting more because people are leaving the coastal regions to come into, higher land. So ours would be increasing in an area where we already needed additional schools. So, I've said it. Thank you.
Thank you. We are about 25 minutes over the time for the 45 minutes, so I just want you all to know that. Ms. Patrica, do you have another question?
I just had a comment, and please don't take this as a criticism. I know that when words come out of my mouth, they sound critical, and they're not meant as a criticism. I know that you're working as hard as humanly possible and that you're running as fast as you possibly can. If there is any way going forward as we enter the marathon portion of this, to have a presentation like this well in advance, or at least several days in advance, so that I can really dig into it. And I feel like I asked stupid questions today because I didn't have time to prepare for it, you know what I mean? And sometimes I can research the answers and don't need to bother you with them. So just as we're going forward, this is so important. A little bit more time would be great. Thank you. That's it. That's all I have on this.
My goal would be to get this information back in the normal rotation of what we're used to doing. These presentations, both from the Chief of Staff today for my update, as well as Amy's, were being worked on at midnight last night, because our time during the days, I just want to be respectful to the public. Board Member Patrica, I get exactly what you're saying, and I don't take it as criticism. I take it as a way for board members to be prepared and our public to be prepared. We are using the daylight hours to do immense amount of work regarding returning kids to school, rebuilding our buildings, and then we're using our night times to get prepared for the following day and build presentations like this. At Cabinet on Monday, one of the items that Jen will put on the list for us is really sitting down and thinking strategically about these presentations from now through December and what we should be covering when we think the right cadence is, for instance, for another finance presentation to come back. When's another great opportunity for us to talk about student enrollment and what we're doing to help bolster student attendance? What are we doing also related to technology loss? I mean, I hear a lot of different topics that have come up today that could be combined for workshops moving forward, and we could continue to talk about these and make sure that then the individual chiefs are prepared and they're not getting a note from the superintendent last Thursday saying, hey, next Wednesday, I really think this would be the great presentation. Dr. Desmore, what do you think? I'm sure she thought a lot of things, but all she said was, yes, sir. So, and here we are. But yes, for the public, I think it's also not just for you as board members to prepare, but for our public to see the work ahead of time as well.
Thank you for that. And I think most of the questions that I have had, someone else up here has asked the questions. I was just curious about one thing that was not asked. Well, I know like Franklin Park was on my mind the whole time when I'm seeing this, because I know this morning I was at a meeting and they're getting ready to move out, you know, for December and getting ready for all of that to take place. So that was highly on my mind when I'm listening to this. And then the fact that I was hearing and reading, not in the near future, receiving the funds. That is pretty scary there. And then the abatement with not paying it for this year. And then I also thought I heard something else where the governor had stated that he legally could not withhold tax, but he was going to allow a delay on taxes. Is that the same thing, or is that a totally different one?
Well, not sure, because I didn't hear the conversation that you're talking about that the governor was having. So I'm not sure whether it is the same circumstance or situation that we're talking about here.
Okay.
But if his comment was in relation to property tax,
It was.
then it would be, of course, very much the same effect, right? That if we are expecting for our general fund between November and December, estimated $448 million to land or in our bank account from property taxes that we don't get at that point in time, because it is delayed, the effect is still the same for us.
Okay.
So we're talking about the same situation, even if he was talking about something different.
Great, thank you. And then just one last thing. With the local businesses, and I really appreciate, and I did speak to the people that were out there, and they were telling me who they were using as far as our local people, so I know that we had local people on our sites, which I really appreciate that. But how do we control if they do not use, because I know it says they are encouraged to use local people if they're not from here, but we have no way of enforcing that. is my,
Actually, I believe that we do. The contractual language would provide us an opportunity to enforce it. We, if you noticed in the presentation, and I don't want to go into the details now because I don't want to
Yeah.
extend it any longer, but there were 4 companies originally contracted with for remediation. One changed its pricing and then, based upon what they told us they could do, made adjustments to their schedule and said that they could get started significantly later than they had promised. Very quick Saturday afternoon conversation, I believe, where we went back and forth for about 10 to 15 minutes, and we decided to terminate that company's contract. There are regulations within our contracts. We just have to ensure that we are staying diligent about receiving the documentation of how they're utilizing local contractors.
thank you. And truthfully, that was just a public service announcement. So thank you for that, because I really want people to understand that we are doing our due diligence to make sure that we are, putting our local people to work. So thank you for that. And Ms. Vaughn, I'm going to ask you, and then we're going to go on to the next one.
Okay, a comment and a question. Especially when you're in the field of education, you learn that you have to be flexible. And I totally understand why we have to have 5- and 10-year plans. But if you'll indulge me for like 30 seconds, Robert Burns, many years ago in To a Mouse, wrote about the little mouse who had spent his summer, or her summer, building a nest in the field. And then like that, the farmer's plow, Ian, the analogy, and the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. And so the lesson is, as educators, we have to, I guess I'm a little looser in the plans because it's planning ahead, and yet you have, in the analogy, a farmer's plow all of a sudden coming through, and things have to change, and prioritize is what we have to look at. And in terms of wrapping our arms around anything, I think the thing we can wrap our arms around is A, there's going to be change, and B, somebody's going to have to pay the bill, because you can't have a civilized society here in Lee County or anywhere else without a strong, robust education system. And I'm so glad that Ms. Morgan brought up the T word, taxes. And as a matter of fact, before she did that, and I hadn't commented on it yet, but I had written down the phrase legislative priorities. And so this is where my question comes in. We submitted legislative priorities, but I dare say that our prioritize, have changed somewhat. Because now, what is our priority? Getting schools back in working order, all the things we've talked about. And so I don't know exactly who can answer this, but I know we have legislative liaison. Who, is that you, Ms. Jordan, or Ms. Patrica? I don't know who that is. Are we at a point to join in with the other majorly affected counties, although we are the most affected, to lobby and change? I mean, maybe that Dr. Bernier, I'm not sure who can answer that, but certainly we have had lots of visits from the governor and the Commissioner of Education, and we've had wonderful cooperation. But I have to say, and this would be for any party, pre-election day cooperation differs from post-election day. And I think we, as realistic people, have to understand that. And we, with our community behind us, because I don't think there's anybody in the community that wants to see our kids going to school in portables forever, or in a tent, or wherever, in an old Publix store up in North Fort Myers, like, you know, the shelter is. We can't be a world-class system without spending money. So it's gonna hurt somewhere. And so what do we do? How do we change our legislative priorities to effectively lobby the legislature? Who has an answer for that? Or maybe you don't want to change your priorities, but I would like to see that.
In the upcoming conversation today, one of the things you'll talk about is upcoming work sessions. I know that Dr. Carlin is prepared, along with your newly approved, sorry, I'm missing the word, your newly approved support regarding legislative interaction and lobbyists will be here for part of that conversation. Certainly the priorities we had prior to Ian may have been shifted, but I do believe that the board was on the right path, and I think we should continue to support some of the student initiatives that we think are vital long-term. But certainly this needs to be part of the conversation in preparation for Tallahassee and when the legislative session starts. I will tell you that the delegation was very interested in touring our school buildings. I stopped counting, just like estimates. I stopped counting the oh my gods in about the second school building, because they were amazed by the amount of work going on. That was part of it. The other part was they had newfound realization, and that came up today about pictures. Newfound realization as to the depth of the repairs that we were underway, and Hector Caffaretta seemed to resonate, and Gulf seemed to resonate the most. And I think Lexington and Diplomat would have, but we're so far along in those school buildings. And I think that was important. So I think we continue to engage with our elected officials. That's my responsibility. I'm happy of the relationships we built prior to having to need to make an ask, but I think Dr. Carlin is taking copious notes. She hears you loud and clearly, so do I. And that again becomes part of that Monday conversation of where does that fit with us, because we need to make sure that gets up to Tallahassee in the proper amount of time.
And if I may, last time we were here on the dais, we heard that one member of the local delegation had toured. Have all of them now toured the schools? Because that is a very, very important piece, as Ms. Gittens brought up about the pictures, and all of us, when we actually saw the things hanging off the ceiling, and that's a wake-up call for especially our delegation to bring forth, hey, we're from Lee County and we saw this, and you, my colleagues in Tallahassee,
I'll have
to help us.
Yes, thank you
I'm
for
done.
that. And no, I'll have Dr. Bernier answer that, what you just
Okay.
asked.
I can respond that the members of that, we had a significant number of members of the delegation who toured the school building, took their own photographs, have been in constant communication. I can provide that list in a
right,
weekly update,
please.
because I don't want to make the mistake of leaving somebody out who was present.
Thank you.
The one member of the delegation that I know who could not be there is because their home was destroyed in the event down in Naples, and she has relocated her base of operations to Tallahassee. Her office, however, has been immediately responsive, and I believe this delegation, and we will provide you all the names of the people who toured, but this delegation has committed to this school district And we just have to begin to do some of our work with the Department of Education, getting cost estimates in and helping provide them that information so that they could potentially make some of those requests on our behalf.
Thank you. Ms. Patrica, you had
Just
a
quickly,
comment?
if I may, through the chair, respond. A colleague reached out to me regarding the consortium that we used to be a member of, and apparently the consortium is working to advocate for all heavily impacted districts regardless of our membership in the consortium. It's the right thing to do for them to advocate for all of us, and I was going to bring it up during good of the order, so done.
Thank you. Again, ladies, thank you so much for all the detailed information and all the hard work that you put in. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. B, we're going to move on to prioritizing the workshop topics. And as I stated, so we're about 30 minutes behind. So I apologize for that, but good conversation, much needed.
Dr. Savage is joining us today to talk about your workshops moving forward. Thank you for your completion of the electronic worksheets that you needed to complete. That helped inform Dr. Savage's work, clearly where your priorities were. He is going to present this, but again, based upon your request today, we will begin to figure out a manner and means to continue to include not just Hurricane Ian updates, but also some of those updates that you're requesting as well regarding students and sort of the path forward. So we'll make sure that we begin that process in earnest following this presentation. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Savage.
Thank you, Dr. Bernier. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, esteemed board members, Dr. Bernier, Attorney Dupuy-Bruno. When we come back to these recurring pieces as per your board protocol manual, you'll have an updated schedule, an opportunity to request additional topics, or even reprioritize or escalate or remove current items. So as Dr. Bernier mentioned, we utilized a tool to help put your prior list of parking lot items in order. And so without further ado, I'm going to jump right into the spreadsheet that is actually the same spreadsheet that Ms. McClung used when she was here. It's just been a little bit reformatted to try to help that. So for the order of business today, we're going to work out of that sheet, and you all do have access to that. It's in your executive content, the link to that particular piece. But I will pull it up on the screen so we can all see it as well. Do that right now. Okay, here it is. All right, so this is in order of priority through the voting matrix and I'm sorry, the board member matrix. So that is also attached to the agenda item, so there's a clarity of how that was derived with the individual board responses. The top item was the proximity plan, which of course we already had a scheduled presentation, and there will be additional ones scheduled as deemed through that particular project. The number 2 priority, which was the strategic plan for community communications and community involvement, that is scheduled for December 6th as a public board briefing. You can see the others when they cut into the new year, January forward. They don't have a specific date because that meeting schedule has not yet been established, but something that Dr. Bernier already referenced was the legislative platform. That is scheduled with the new consultant, and that is on December 5th. And so that is there as well. The board attorney evaluation instrument, which was the 5th top priority, has already occurred. We had that first of that, but again, those workshops will continue. Just as I've been discussing, you'll see in the additional action notes, this will reference additional meetings that are scheduled, the scope of those aspects as well. These are just, again, additions to the current form. I did want to say there are a few where just some additional clarification was requested. So actually, before I get into that, I just want to draw your attention to a new tab, which is the key tab. This is an intention of just kind of providing a structure and organization to these various requests and items. So the first I just want to go over very briefly is the format options. Typically, these will take the place of a board briefing or a board workshop. That's the most common aspect, but some of the new shift that has really been occurring very effectively is that the superintendent has really attempted to improve the quality of the briefing and the superintendent one-to-one individually with board members. That allows board members to have more in-depth understanding that then sometimes does not require or limits then a public briefing, so it can be a smaller because the level of depth is more geared towards the public audience as opposed to lack of clarity among individual board members. An additional structure that's been utilized is also the one-way video briefing. This becomes a very comprehensive way of providing a topic for the board members that is very interesting to them, but isn't necessarily a public interest area, and so that's another method that has been utilized, as well as in occasions in-depth with assigned staff. So when there's a true expert among staff that can be assigned to meet with board, that is something the superintendent does sometimes assign as well. The most frequent communication is really that weekly board.
I'm sorry, Dr. Savage, I think Ms. Vaughn is are you having difficulties finding something?
No, she's just showing me
Oh, okay.
something additional, yeah.
I gotcha.
Yes. Oh, no problem at all. That weekly board communication being just a frequent way to get some initial understanding of issues, and helps to keep the information flowing in respect to that, as well as the executive shade session, which these only occur during those statutorily permissible occasions. The other key below is just classifying these various items so that we can close them out, so that we don't have items basically in purgatory for over a year in some cases. So the status of closed is really our desire to eventually have them closed, so these items have been sufficiently addressed. The second, the most common, will be that they are scheduled. This shows that there is active movement, that a topic that has received consensus is in fact scheduled. In some cases, it needs to be tentatively scheduled. And again, there's a description there as to why that may be the case, whether it's ambiguity, whether it's, as in the case of the new year, we don't have spring schedule derived at this time, so it can at best be tentatively scheduled. The additional status options we have are a pending staff action. In some cases, there's just work needed on the part of staff in order to continue to get it to a point where we can feel confident that we're honoring the board request. Also, one that we've added was a deference to the superintendent. And in some cases, with the new superintendent, there comes a wealth of experiences that sometimes, with a fresh look at an old issue, may want to help guide and focus that. So what may have been perceived as an issue may not carry that same issue once he's had a chance to make a recommendation and follow that up with board members. And other ones that really do require, for our standpoint, because again, what I didn't mention was that we bring this as a standing chief item. So as the board makes these requests, we bring it to the chiefs. The chiefs then, in their respective areas of purview, review each item, make recommendations as to how long it will take their staff to gather the requisite information, and then get a scheduled piece. So sometimes maybe the topic that we've captured, we're not fully sure if it captures the scope of what the board has intended. So I think I have one such example today of a clarification request, as well as in some cases where a chief believes that they have actually answered this question, where there's a requested presentation, they believe they did answer that particular presentation, so we just want to verify that in fact that has occurred before we close out that item. Additionally, there's always the opportunity, as we have today, one example of this, a new request, where an individual member may make a request and they fully acknowledge, as per the protocol manual, that they're introducing this is an item for the board to achieve a mutual agreement on, that this is something that should drive the work of staff. So those can also be entertained here or in other good of the order as per your board protocol manual. So that's just the key to remind folks, so when they're looking through these, they have the ability to see where that falls. So we come to the first one where a clarification was requested. And this was in the in-house versus outsourced work across the organization. This is a long-standing request. And what we wanted to do for this particular piece, because it is such a significant lift across the entire organization to account for all aspects of something that may be outsourced, that if there were particular departments of interest where the work within a particular department or several departments is really of interest to the board, this could help us set the model for what it would look like on future occasions. And so I just wanted to make that request to the board.
And if you don't mind, I know this was Ms. Vaughn's ask, so if Ms. Vaughn could clarify that, that would be great. if you recall. But I thought it was legal.
I do recall it was, I first asked for this when I was first on the board, and it was never, ever, it was sidestepped. And since I'm in a lame duck position, it's fine. I don't, what, the clarification is, originally, it was something from maintenance department, originally, almost 4 years ago. And I had asked some of the tasks. HVAC was one that I kind of remember, and we're hiring outside vendors. We could use locksmith as another good example. And I was just looking for cost analysis. And, you know, you're talking about moving forward, people that are going to be on the board, talking about saving money. In some cases, it is a savings to use in-house. And in other cases, when we don't have the bandwidth, two choices: either hire a outside contractor or get more people that know how to put in locks or whatever. So, I mean, it's a moot point now. It sat there for so many years.
Madam Chair, if I may, through the chair, just address that. So this brings up two very quick points. One is that while there is an initiating board member who lodges this, once the board in its entirety says this is a priority, then it does become a matter for the board. So even though you may be outgoing, Board Member Vaughn, that doesn't necessarily mean that this was of merit to the entire board at that time. Now, using the example that you cited as maintenance, that would be an excellent department that has a substantial amount of both in-house and out-of-house work that starts as a financial story of specifically the financial pieces, but then there gets into content expertise as to why. So it is really a marriage of that piece, and that's a fine starting point if we'd like.
It's up to the rest of my colleagues here. It was something before we ever had this list that I brought up almost 4 years ago. It was never anything that the rest of the board members were interested in, and so I understand that. So whatever. I know that's a terrible answer, whatever, but that's how I feel about it. There's 7 people, and if nobody else is interested in it, drop it.
Ms. Vaughn, if it's on this list, that meant that it was agreed upon by the board, so that's why it's still on, that's why it's on this list.
Or ever. But anyway.
Ms. Gittens?
Don't sound so disappointed.
No, I'm just, are you speaking on this particular?
Yes, I'm speaking on this workshop list. The question I have, at one point, we were able to go back and see previous, historically, what had been asked and what had been covered, and I know that you've updated it. Is there somewhere that we can locate the previous? Do you have that you can share with us, please?
Yes, Ms. Gittens, so this is actually just adding a tab to the existing spreadsheet. So all the prior lists are still present for posterity's sake, so that you can go back and see them. This is just an attempt to help us consolidate and move forward. But that it is still available in the different tabs. So you'll see after the key, there's a consolidated list from Cindy. That was, again, one of her lists. Then the board topics parking lot. All of this information represents the pulling of information from those lists through the prioritization activity to move us forward so that it's clear in front and in order and scheduled.
Oh, okay, I see it at the bottom. I had not, it was covered up by something. I couldn't see it at the bottom. Thank you very much.
Ms. Giovanelli?
Back to the clarification of Ms. Vaughn's number, I don't even, what, the, number 8, thank you. I would recommend this is somewhat important because of the maintenance services right now are going to be utilized quite a bit. So I think this is probably now, because of the hurricane, kind of might have pushed it up to the top of the list. And I don't know if I'm the only one that thinks that, but I think that understanding this and getting a little better handle on it would be beneficial. Thank you.
And actually, Dr. Savage, I do see on your the compiled one, that it is number 7 on there as well. that it was moved over. So, okay. Think you want to go ahead and continue?
Just want to verify it, just for ensure for clarity's sake. So I'm going to list that maintenance is listed as that top priority. That will allow us to get an estimate as to when that could be scheduled, knowing that, of course, they're very busy right now. It really starts with the financial side of it, but then that piece would be there. But maintenance would be the department that I'm hearing was the original interest and still is of a pretty significant interest, unless I am hearing that incorrectly.
Right, it was what can we do in-house versus what are we outsourcing, and what is the financial difference of that? What does that look like? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Ms. Giovanelli.
Well, and as well as the need, I mean,
Yeah.
do we have the staff that can even do some of this, or is it, so what is, I think the question goes back to, what can we do in-house versus outsourcing it? And so I think that, or do we hire someone that would fit that need, that, or do we have the staff that we had it, but maybe we don't now? I mean, I think there's several questions that can open up too.
Yeah, and I apologize, I thought that's what I had said, but,
Oh, okay.
okay,
Sorry.
thanks.
Thank you very
Is that good
much.
with you, Dr. Savage?
That certainly does.
Okay.
The other piece that I have listed just as a verify completion was the elected versus appointed superintendent, came as the 9th priority item. We actually had that this was delivered on April 11th of 22 by the legal services. So the request was, is there any additional information needed prior to us being able to close this request?
Any comments on this one?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Miss, yes.
I'm sure I was the one that,
No, this was actually Ms. Vaughn who brought it up in the beginning. Okay, yeah, I believe it could probably be closed out. Ms. Fisher, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think we can close it out because since that time, we had the presentation by the legal department, and we have, we've utilized that moving forward, and I think it can be closed out now.
Ms. Gittens?
I have a question on when you have scheduled date, and let's say you have 9/20/22 and it didn't happen on that date, there's not a column for the date it actually happened. How do you differentiate a scheduled date and the actual completion of that item?
Yes, if it was scheduled, then that is, at this point, scheduled. Once it has been completed, the status will change to completed, and it will be brought back in front of the board just as we're doing today. So any item that we are, like essentially, like the one that we just discussed was verify completion, this will then be turned into completed, so that officially I will take this off of your list as something that needs additional action. It will just be part of our history that this was done on this particular time. Now, in some cases, like the very top one, it's scheduled, but there will be additional scheduled dates. And so you'll see in the additional action, additional meeting notes, similar to the board attorney evaluation. We had one already that occurred, but there will be more, and those are specified in the additional action notes. So board members can at any given time say, oh yes, these are planned between now and February to occur, so that there's a clear understanding on all sides of what needs to occur and when.
And I think, kind of piggybacking on Ms. Vaughn, I don't see any others, but I think any of the ones that, for those of us that will not be here, that if there was any priority to completing those at all? Are there any, is that the only one, Ms. Vaughn, that?
Again, with all due respect, whatever's on this list was voted upon by all of us as the board, so I think we need to look at it as such, even though one may have recommended it. We still, everyone agreed upon getting the information and moving forward with this, so.
No, I understand that, but what I'm saying, if someone brought it up because it was a concern and the board agreed, still the person that brought it up had a reason for doing it. I understand what you're saying and we can move on, but that's what I'm saying. I know the whole board agreed, but if the person that brought it up has the driving force behind it, is all I'm saying. But I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gittens. So Dr. Savage, I think we're on number 11, right?
Yes, so essentially, moving down across this list, you'll see that each of these have either been scheduled or they are requiring some level of action on the part of staff. 2 of them are. And then we get to the final piece, which is this was a request that has come in essentially for a workshop to update the strategic plan for insurance and benefits prior to new bids, which I think this is particularly the intent of this type of action, is trying to get ahead of things that will be coming, but it does still require the board in its entirety to achieve consensus. So I believe this was Ms. Morgan's request, and so I want to turn it back to Ms. Morgan with your permission, Madam Chair, just so that she could articulate this.
Yes, please.
So I noticed in the November 1 agenda that we have a number of bids rolling forward for the last year in insurance for virtually all aspects of our insurance and benefits. And I felt that since these contracts will expire in '23, we need to have a conversation about, an in-depth conversation about insurance and benefits for the district before we get into the bid process for new contracts. That's what this is about.
Okay, thank you. And I know finance has been talking about this for years as well. So I don't know if there's, Ms. Fisher, please?
Yeah. And I don't know if we have a recent update from Insurance Task Force.
We do not.
We do not.
We're meeting, I think, next week.
Okay.
We do not. We're meeting next week, I think.
Okay.
I don't have my calendar memorized.
Well, I think Mr. Pri-Bruno that would have been one that was put on hold as well, correct? Insurance Task Force remember we are putting the advisory boards, is that not one of them as well that would be put on?
No, the Insurance Task Force is not a normal, regular 1.20 board advisory committee.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Ms. Patrica. Okay, so back to you.
Well, so this essentially, I'd be looking for just verification that this is a board consensus item, so I can take this back to chiefs to have it scheduled with a clear understanding of the purpose behind it, getting ahead of this 23 piece. So
Thank you.
I'm
So
perceiving by head nods that this is definitely something of the will board, so
that
I will record this
everybody?
as today.
leaves that? Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Vaughn.
We have one that we have a date specific for that's not on the list. I want to make sure it's still scheduled, even though I won't be here for it, because it was, and I know Ms. Morgan said since she is now the EDAC board liaison, but I just want to put it out there one more time that we have a date specifically for a workshop based on their recommendation from EDAC last year on going from our present system of 5 single-member districts and the 2 at large to 7 single-member districts. So is that still, I think it was a January date.
It was. Yeah.
So, and I know Ms. Morgan had told me personally that she would make sure, but I just wanted to put it out there again, since we're discussing this, that did that need to be on this?
I would suggest that it is, only that it's captured because it wasn't part of the prioritization. And so I think this is always an opportunity where you as a board, because of your protocol, can add new topics, you can remove topics, you can reprioritize. This is simply a schedule being proposed to say that this is our intention, is to schedule according to this list for clarity's sake. This is a great example of something that I would certainly want to memorialize in this, and with that particular date, if that is still the will of the board.
I think we already came to a consensus on it, did we not?
And Dr. Savage, this was something that Ms. Vaughn, as the liaison, brought before us at a board action meeting, actually, and spoke on that. And I think it was asked of the superintendent at the I think it was Dr. Say. I'm so confused. I'm not sure who it was sitting here at that time, but I'm sure we can go back on the notes on that. But I know that you did bring it before at an action meeting for that to be discussed. I'd have to go back to look
But
at
all I'm
the,
saying is, does it need to be on here? And we already had a consensus and
I think we
new
should keep it
liaison,
on
but
here. That way it's.
It's a date
it's in-
specific.
Yeah, it's in our.
Because if it's delayed, there won't even be enough, and Ms. Dupree Bruno is nodding her head
Yeah.
on that. If it's delayed, again, it becomes useless because you need X number of months. If the board agrees, you need X number of months to enact it.
No, thank you for bringing that back up, and I do believe that it does need to be on here, so that way it is in our face. It's there, we see it.
I'll be
So-
happy to have the date reflected. I've added it to the list to be scheduled prior to the piece. Thank you for that clarification, and thank you.
We can go-
That's the end of our list. Now, there is an opportunity as a board, this is your discussion, your opportunity to
Madam Chair.
remove any items from consideration if you feel they're no longer valid, or to add additional topics, but again, you're not limited to only doing it today, but that is part of the structure of this activity.
Okay, thank
Madam
you.
Chair.
And then, Mr. Pre-Bruno?
Thank you. I just want clarification to make sure that I refresh everybody's recollection with regards to that presentation with regards to single-member districts. There was a date, so we need to make sure that it is presented in January, because the timeline that was presented, if we presented it in January, the board is inclined, then there's a set of processes that need to take place.
Yes, that has to do, my familiarity is that it has to happen in an odd year because of the nature, there's a whole piece around it if you're considering it in a very strong timeline to be followed. So I'll memorialize that as well, Attorney Dupree Bruno.
Thank you both. Is there any items that any of you feel that are on this list? Is this what you were asking, Dr. Savage, that are on this list that we feel that should not be on the list? Or are there any other items that we feel that need to be added to the list? And I know that sorry, I wrote it down. Ms. Rotrika had mentioned insurance, but a different insurance than what's on here right now. The insurance pertaining to buildings and schools and Ms. Patrica, can you?
Yeah, I got the sense from the superintendent that he's going to include that in an update, an
Okay.
upcoming update. I don't think it's a separate topic.
Okay, perfect. Okay, and so are there any other items that anyone would like to see on here? Or are there any items, again, that we believe that have been answered in one way, shape, or form, and we can remove? I'm just going to go down the line and ask everybody. Ms. Morgan?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Vaughn?
Fine.
Ms. Gittens?
No.
Ms. Patrica?
I'm fine, thank you.
Ms. Giovanelli?
I'm fine. I just am curious, though, on the rankings, how did you arrive at it? Because I see where some people put the same number for many, and I thought we were supposed to rank them 1 through 14.
Yes, I'm happy to have this entered in. So I've attached this particular piece into board item just for transparency's sake. It's actually in the board item. It's a single page showing the calculations, and it is true that in some cases the form was not filled out according to the directions. There are supposed to be no ties. I understand it is a challenge to do, and so when you see the same number occurring for multiple times, that's essentially reflecting that I rated the same topic the same rating. And so that absolutely is reflected there. It was just, that's how it was submitted.
So my concern is it a true reflection of a ranking then? I mean, is it really ranked truly?
So mathematically, there is some, because each person did it their own way, and some were able to get it to all 14, and others had their ties because they still ranked it accordingly to their own method. Mathematically, it still works out that it does reflect their ranking. It would have been preferable to have it done uniform by all members, but unfortunately, that's just the nature of how it was calculated. This reflects the board's action specifically, and I'd rather be transparent about that than, but again, this is why these types of things, the more we use them, the more confidence we get in doing it, and the better it becomes. This does, though, still reflect a pretty sound, principled way to organize those topics.
Thank you.
And I know, me personally, I can tell you, I was confused, because I was rating each individual as an individual versus collectively and having the different numbers. So that's why I have the same numbers, because I'm looking at it as one and rating it from 0 to 10. So that was my fault that I did it that way. Ms. Fisher?
So in looking at the compiled responses, I see that some of them on there, some of the topics really had already been completed.
Yes.
Okay,
And other than that, I'm fine.
okay, thank you. And Ms. Gittens, please.
As we're looking at the list, though, I'm wondering, in light of current situation and things that are going on, if maybe one more pass at ranking them. Example, affordable housing may be something that was down the line before, and it brings it to a higher level of importance since we have so many staff members that are within that realm. So, I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there, and your thoughts?
Well, the initial attempt was just to put a very large list of priorities in order so that we as staff could begin to prioritize accordingly. I think that because it did reflect, I think that at the time, at least that action, I think that one in particular, the affordable housing, is still requiring some staff action because that's kind of a long-term, that's been a long-standing request as well. So I would say for my intention, I feel like we have enough to at least have these scheduled. But certainly it's the will of the board. Every time we come back together, we could do a prioritization matrix every time you want, as frequently as you would like, to assist you in that effort. But the attempt here is to bring this schedule to you so that you actually can see it operationalized. Your intent, in terms of operationalized into a schedule, so you can see this is when it is. You might say, I think this isn't fast enough. There's a particular one I want something sooner, or you know what, this was a priority then, but now for Ian, we no longer need that. So that's the full intent of bringing something like this forward.
And I totally agree with that. I just, I think, going back to affordable housing, yes, it's a long-term thing, but are there potentially some short-term asks that could come out of this that might affect us sooner than later? I mean, it's a serious topic on many realms. You hear it talked about a lot, and it's not going to get better. And in light of the superintendent saying, we may have more kids and less staff, it's a critical piece. And I mean, I won't be a part of that, but I'm just saying that you may want to look at moving that up and not so much just all the legislators, and what actually can be done. What committees or whatever do we need to be on? Who do we need to raise the flag to? Because if we are recruiting teachers and staff to come here and they can't find anywhere to live, that's an issue. That's going to affect all this and more, because we can't run without staff. Just making it a point, so.
Thank you. Ms. Morgan?
I think it's a good point, but I think the problem is that it's beyond the school district. It's a county issue, it's a Lee Health issue. The real question is whether there is appetite in the county for addressing a very serious problem. And, in 2018, the Horizon Council commissioned an affordable housing study. It was published. There were 7 recommendations made, some involving the property of Lee County, a school district, and nothing has moved forward from there, as far as I know, apart from perhaps some sidebar conversations between some of the people who were involved. So, yeah, that's what I'll say.
And Ms. Giovanelli?
This is not ranked real high on the list, and I think that's the whole point in the ranking. So I would agree with Ms. Morgan regarding it. It is a greater issue. I mean, that's the reason why I brought it up. But I think that it's something that we have to partner in the community with, because it's more than it's certainly not our role as a school board. I am actually on the Board of County Commission's Affordable Housing Committee, and they meet like once a year. Just thought I'd throw that out there. And we have a meeting next week, or coming up, so might be the only one for the year. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I did read a communication from the Women for a Better Lee County, and they were reviewing things in anticipation of the November elections. And they were talking kind of about that, about some of the decisions that have been made by the county commission that didn't support affordable housing.
Thank you. I believe that after everyone, I'm good with this, and I really appreciate what you've done with this. I think this is, it helps you see everything really clear, and I thank you so much. So I believe after speaking to everyone here, we're good to go.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we will be moving on to our next, Dr. Bernier. So we are to the agenda review of November the 1st. Please and thank you.
I've not received a lot of questions regarding the agenda review. I did get some. I want to make sure that we remind ourselves that while the meeting posts last evening, that meeting is available to all of you as board members as early as the previous Tuesday. I know that's a new way of operating for us, but I do think that's really important. So if there are any additional questions, we can certainly get those answered. If I can't answer them now, I will answer them through the board update on Friday. I did get a couple of questions. One was regarding the consent agenda, approval of personnel recommendations, and there is an odd there's 2 items. One is a resignation of a location and position for an individual who is our Curriculum and Instruction Innovation High Coordinator for graduation. The other is a transfer of that same employee that occurred back on July 1st. So let me start at July 1st and work up chronologically. This individual was working in a particular aspect of academic services, and she switched locations. She remained in the same position, but her location was changed from school counseling to curriculum and instruction to better fit what she did, which was helping with high school graduations. School counseling is very different than helping academic events like a graduation occur. It was not a promotion. It was a transfer made for better alignment in academic services. And clearly, any new appointments always are brought forward to the board. This was a transfer within the department. Unfortunately, not all that information. I know that Human Resources and Academic Services work in the same building, but not all that information transferred at the appropriate time. So what's happened all at once is we have a transfer of an employee that occurred in July. That same employee has left our employee as of 9/30/22. That was in September, when they made the decision to go work in private industry. So it does seem odd that an appointment and a transfer within a position and a resignation would appear on the same agenda. And I've spoken to both ends of this conundrum, both in academic services and in human resources, that we need to be better about processing our information as we move forward. Do you want me to stop there or go on to the next one? I'm not sure if the board member would have a question.
Mr. Giovanelli, did you have any other questions with that?
I do. So my real question really is, are we feeling the position now, or are we advertising? What are we doing?
I'd have to go back through my email. We have a very specific process for filling positions. That would be up to Mr. Spiro, Dr. Spiro and Dr. Cupid McCoy to send me a message that they would request permission to fill the position. I would review the position with them and with Mr. Dodig, and then depending on my decision, I would give them a proceed. In this particular case, because usually this would come from a school base, I would drive a very important point home that I've been doing since we started this process, is that we would not impact a school building in order to fill this position at this time.
Okay, so the answer is no, I think.
Well, they can proceed with advertisement because there might be somebody coming in from the outside who would meet the skill set. But if a great school counselor at high school X or middle school Y wanted to apply, I would not allow that position to move forward because we'd be impacting a school during the school year.
Gotcha, thank you.
The next one was a specific one related to J7, approval to renew the ITN for legal identity and theft protection services. The question was, what is the cost to our employees? There's no cost to the district for voluntary legal protection services. Employees who elect for this benefit, so this is an opportunity, kind of like in our benefits package, you also have the opportunity to sign up for an attorney if you want for a year. You do commit that you will sign up for that attorney for an entire year. You just can't, get your will taken care of and then drop. But this one is an opportunity for people to have some additional benefits. They do elect to take it, and an employee who elects this benefit does so through payroll deduction for a monthly premium of $15 or $7.50 per check. And I have the job description for the coordinator of graduation as well. I'll make sure that gets forwarded to the entire
received
board.
one. We received it.
Okay.
Efficiency, it's awesome, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, were there any other questions that, did anyone else have any questions for Dr. Bernier that he can get back with us on?
Again, I'm so grateful and so impressed with the district and school staff, student response, and what I've heard from staff members and administrators at the schools I've visited is that the best thing we ever did was to come back right away to school and provide a safe, caring learning environment for our students and bring staff together so that they could support one another through this difficult time. So thank you for that. And I want to thank Ms. Jordan for having connections and getting a lot of wonderful donations to be taken to our schools. I had the opportunity to go with her yesterday to Tropic Isles and deliver 70 backpacks with school supplies and food in them. And of course the school is very grateful. So the community is really coming up. And the community is really coming together. And so I'm grateful for your work in the community because you make a difference. And we are in the middle of Red Ribbon Week, even though all of the celebrations have been postponed. So be free, stay drug-free. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Ms. Giovanelli?
I don't really have anything either, other than just thanking staff for all their work they're doing and getting schools back, and just the progress and the information is really helpful because the community, they're wanting to hear it as well, not just the board members. I mean, yes, it's great information, but being transparent and providing the information to the community is a better understanding, and so I think it's really great and important, and I really appreciate it. I just have to say, anyone that missed Monday night's event with the, and I don't, I'm going to say the name wrong, Ms. Fawn? Yes, the Haitian.
Asian American Community Coalition of Southwest Florida.
Thank you. Yes, we had a great time, and I would highly recommend you to attend. The entertainment was probably the best, like optimum this year, and one of the ladies' daughter played the piano that was her own composition that was honestly breathtaking. So I just wanted to, the talent in our community is amazing, so thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Patrica. Ms. Gittens.
And I have pictures. People in the audience are smiling and hiding their faces if they were at the event. But it was really, really a fun time. Thank you so much. And I hope that they raise lots of money for the scholarships and all that they're doing in the community. You got me thinking about that and singing and dancing. I have to share one of the things, the young lady, Miss Guillaume, that was the artist, at one point she was singing in Creole, so we had no idea what she was saying. And it was a call and response thing, so she would say something and she'd hold the mic out, and to us it sounded like he's one of us, so we were just singing he's one of us. It's not Creole, but it worked anyway. I just want to say too, thank you to everyone, and a shout out to Chief Newland, because he's still schlepping over there at EOC. And we're going to have to give him a gift certificate to somewhere so he can go far away and no one can see him and ask him a question. But he's still fighting the good fight, and I just wanted to say we appreciate that. And I will say on the, however, 2-3 years ago, the suggestion of the agenda review was a suggestion I had brought up, and I want to say it's not only worked well, but I think the communication continues to increase as the questions continue to decrease, which to me says communication is getting better and people are getting questions answered. And I've said before many times, some of the things that I have that I will put on there are for the purpose of letting the community know and understand answers to questions that we have received behind, the wall. So many times we will do that. But thank you for the staff and the superintendent. It's working well, and I think we're working smoother in communication. I think that is about it right now, and I had mentioned before the clothing drive that they did at South was a tremendous project and involved literally thousands of dollars of donations. And I will be asking you that if on my last action meeting will be on the 1st, and I would love to be able to recognize some of the people that literally donated thousands and thousands of dollars worth of material, of clothing and all of that, to recognize them on the 1st. And if the board agrees, then we can at least do something at the beginning of the meeting. If not, I will be doing it during my comments at the end. So it's up to the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Vaughn, please.
Well, I'm on the board of Haitian American Community Coalition, and I was actually, it was a relief when we finished with the gala Monday night, because I was quite frankly very tired from everything. But I don't know what pictures you have. I should have taken a picture of you, because Ms. Gittens was getting down to the music. And I'll also have to say that my good friend and the president of HACC, Beatrice Jaquette Castor. We had a long conversation, kind of an informal debriefing, and I did ask her about the lyrics to.
We don't want to know.
She was very coy about what she said, and all I said is I picked up an old Rolling Stone song and I said, well, back in the day when they were on the Ed Sullivan Show, they couldn't say, let's spend the night together back in the 70s, and he made them change it to, let's spend some time together. And I said, is it kind of like that? And from her response, it may have been a little more graphic, and there were a lot of churches there, and so I saw a lot of people really enjoying the singing, and I'll have to say, even if you don't know what the lyrics were, it was very engaging music. So, but very seriously, it was our first sellout, and our featured performer, I didn't know her, but she's really very, very popular in the Haitian community. She's actually a recording artist and a little bit of a diva, let's say. And it was our first sellout, and we're meeting on Saturday. And what I'm hoping for, because I've been the scholarship chair there since we started doing scholarships, we've been giving $1,000 scholarships to graduating seniors from Lee County schools who are of Haitian heritage. And I'm really hoping, and I think we're going to be able to do it, to raise those amounts to $1,500, because it's really sad to say that $1,000 doesn't go that far with the cost of colleges anymore. And so I'm really pleased, and I'm hoping, because I'm going to be doing this until I can't anymore, so I hope to see more of district people there next year when we do it. Other than that, I pretty much commented as we went along today, so I don't have anything else to offer for your listening pleasure.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. Sorry, Ms. Morgan.
That's okay. I have nothing for good of the order. Thank you.
Thank you. Just next time, send a memo out that red is the color to wear, or blue, so we know what we're supposed to wear.
That you know what, and the ushers all had red, and so I don't know. It went out, and for those of you who don't know, and I love the Haitian community. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Haitian community, but the dresses alone, right, were a fashion show. I mean, just, they love to dress up and they look gorgeous, so.
Thank you, and I'll just share real quick something that Ms. Fisher had mentioned. I have some friends who found themselves not working at a moment and decided to start a neighbor helping neighbors. And with that, they were able to supply to us 250 backpacks that were filled with food, filled with supplies, and we were able to hand out all of them. I had some little elves. I felt like Santa Claus. Had some elves helping me take them to the schools, pack in our cars. Tropic Isles received 70 of those. Hancock, we had Mr. Malloy and Mr. Ramirez, Dr. Malloy and Mr. Ramirez, took out half of Hancock. I took the other ones out there. We, Tropic Isles, Ms. Fisher helped me carry all those out there. Couldn't fit them in the car. Tice, I went out to Tice and handed them out at Tice yesterday. And just while I was at Tice, it was just really fabulous because the outpour of the community who have come together to bring supplies to us and these schools has just been enormous. They literally had, and I think somebody had mentioned, oh, it was today on my other meeting, I apologize, said they've never seen so much water in their lives. They had rooms full of water, rooms full of food, rooms full of clothes, and today at Tice, at 12 o'clock, they were going to have like a clothing drive where they were going to lay it all out so that the community could walk there and take what they needed, clothes, shoes, food, whatever it was, they were going to supply that. So not only are our schools taking care of our children inside, they're taking care of communities outside. And I really have to give them credit for that. It's a lot of work. Also, we have 2,000 more backpacks coming. They'll be coming here any day. They were able to secure them for us. They will be filled, so we won't have to fill them. So we're hoping to get them in. We thank you, Dr. Bernier. We have secured a spot here in the district to bring those in, the pallets in, and then we'll get those distributed out to the ones who really need that, whether it's high school, middle school, so they have the right supplies in the bags per grade level. Also, I just wanted to say too that our community partnership school, we just added another one, so Colonial is another one, which is really exciting. I was on their meeting this morning with them and what we're doing in the schools, and that's another thing. So you have three, it's the schools everywhere. They're just helping the community, and it makes you feel really good that we're a part of all of that. So thank you for all your hard work. Thank you, Dr. Bernier, for all of your hard work and making sure that this boat is moving forward. Is it the ship, the boat, one of us, the canoe? But we're all moving forward, and we are going to get through this together, so thank you. And Ms. Dupree Bruno, do you have anything to
I don't, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Bernier, please.
Just a couple of items. One is first to thank all of you for your efforts in this community. I look down the dais and I know individual stories where you have helped support neighbors, schools, families, backpacks, food. It doesn't matter what or where you live or reside, you've been available to this community, and you're a great and very shining example of what a school board can do, both together and as individuals. And I got a kick out of a couple of our early conversations when somebody said to me, I may be getting out of my lane. And I said, if there's any opportunity to get out of your lane, it's during a hurricane, right? This is that chance to, and I just want to say thank you for the things that all of you've been doing. The fatigue is clear on all of our faces for the efforts we've made. And I want you to have that recognition as well. Sadly, we have some sad news to share. We did lose 2 students this past week. The families have asked for a significant amount of privacy regarding those losses. But I think the understanding of what our students are going through and some decisions sometimes they make for what they perceive to be a major problem but could be a temporary one with the right help. So to the community, I want to continue to assure you that the resources are out there for our young people. We need to make sure that we are getting that information consistently updated with our counselors and our licensed mental health therapists. And to our student body, especially those older students who would recognize some of the signs of a student in stress. Again, goes back to safety, right? The safety of everyone involves those community members within a school. So I want to make sure that we have the opportunity as a school district to mourn a bit, but also to remind us that we have a responsibility to reach out for those in need right now and ensure that they are getting the help and support that they need. I'm happy to report this morning we had an accident down near South Fort Myers High School with an 11th grader. That 11th grader is still in the hospital but is doing fine. The injuries have been minimal, and that's all the details I have at this point. Tuesday night I will try to bring you, during my comments, a little update. NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, was released on Monday. I'm trying to get the data with Matthew Kay arranged so that I could do just a small presentation like this, just talk a little bit about what NAEP showed nationally and then how it can be interpreted by our data. Again, NAEP data for those students who take the exam is not available to us. That's held at the state, held at the national level. So we don't get NAEP scores back on Lee County, but our students do participate in that nation's report card. You know it's getting back to normal when you're talking about football and volleyball and all the other sports moving towards championships, when you're hearing about the great work that our athletes are doing, but there's a whole nother level of our community, and those are in the band and the arts. And I don't know if this is the first performance since the hurricane, but North Fort Myers High School is opening this Friday night and Saturday night to a play called Noise is Off. If you're not familiar, it is a great play. And I don't want to ruin it, but just shot from a very different angle for the audience. Instead of you seeing what's occurring on stage, the play is about what occurs behind stage during the course of a performance. It's really a fabulous show. And then finally, I did get some numbers in the course of our meeting. We will get this in the board update, and these numbers will continue to be updated. We've had 716 students officially withdraw. We've had 112 new enrolled students. And we have 528 that is our current list of what we would consider a no-show. We don't know anything about them. So we are working that list. Academic Services provided that to me. We will continue to give you better data as the days proceed. And finally, just a reminder, because we started this way at the beginning of the meeting, to the community who's hung in there with us to the bitter end, the information related to some of our buildings, their conditions, their indoor air qualities will go up tonight. So please stay tuned, and thank you for the board and the community for their patience in that regard as well. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Dr. Bernier, I just wanted to, the school play for North Fort Myers, remember they had to change that Friday one, so it's Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday because of homecoming. Our kids are having homecoming on Friday night.
I'm sorry I did not have the entire run of show. I just was looking at my calendar because I have to make a decision of whether I'm going Friday or Saturday. So shout out to North Fort Myers. They have longer dates, and congratulations on homecomings being rescheduled as well. Our students deserve those opportunities.
Exactly. Thank you so much. And seeing no other business to come before this board, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Have a great evening.